Hello everybody, my name is Tauqeer Zafar and today I will be discussing with you the question paper of History Optional 2021. So in this year in 2021, the question of History Optional was not that difficult. Some of the questions were tricky, but most of the questions were direct in both the paper, in paper 1 and paper 2. So let us see the type of questions and what can be the probable answers for those questions. So let us check the questions. First, I'll be discussing with you the paper 1. See, paper 1 has section A and section B, and paper 1 is 250 marks, and in this section A they ask ancient India. Okay. And the first question of section A, that is from the map, and the question says, identify the following places marked on the map supplied to you and write a short note of about 30 words on each of them in your question come answer booklet. Locational hints for each of the places marked on the map are given below. So let us see these are the sites. There are 20 sites, and on all the 20 sites you have to write a short note. This is the map of India, and there are sites. See, which is the first site? First site is, just hang on, is Paleolithic site. Paleolithic site. The first site is the Paleolithic site, and this site is basically a place called as Ataripakkam. If someone marks a very near, the different place which is very close to this was Reningunta. Okay, and this site is a Paleolithic site, and this Paleolithic site has a significance, and the same significance you have to write in this case. So it is located in Tamil Nadu, in the northwest part of Chennai, and some significance attached to it in all the sites you have to write. So this site is the Paleolithic site, Atirapakkam. If someone marks Reningunta also, then also it is correct. Okay, the second site is let us see, the Mesolithic site, which is, the second site basically. Mesolithic site. We find this site here, which is a Mesolithic site. It is Langnaj. The most appropriate guess will be Langnaj. It is in Gujarat. Okay, and the other probable option near to this site can be Ratanpura also. Ratanpura. Okay, the third site which you will see, what they ask is basically, the third site is a Neolithic site. And this third site is located in Assam, and this is 𝐷𝐷. It is located in Assam. So in all the sites, whatever is mentioned there, and you have to mark the site and you have to write in 30 words. Mainly we write the significance of these sites. So for example, if they ask you any site, for example 𝐷𝐷 or Bhimbetka or any other site, then in that case you have to write, for example Reningunta, then you have to write that it is a site which is located in Chittoor district of Andhra Pradesh, and it is an upper Paleolithic site. So in 30 words, you can write at least, one significance of that particular site. For example, Langnaj is there. Then in Langnaj, you will have to write that it was situated in the northern part of Gujarat. Okay, and the occupational deposit of this site, is divided into 3 periods basically. And these periods are basically Mesolithic period, because the site is Mesolithic site. And in these sites, the microliths, which is a very important feature of the Mesolithic period, the microliths are found. Human burials are found, bones of the wild animals are found. Okay, and these microliths are basically mainly in the form of blades, triangles, crescents. So you have very less word to write, so you will be writing some important feature. You cannot write all the things, it is very difficult. So 1 or 2 feature you can write about that particular site. Okay, so I was in the third site. This was first Ataripakkam, second is Langnaj, third is Dao Jalo Harding, and the 4th site is basically, this is, we have to see what they asked, Neolithic Chalcolithic site. Neolithic Chalcolithic site, this is the 4th site. It has both the features, Neolithic features and Chalcolithic feature, and this is Mehergarh. Mehergarh. Mehergarh is located in Balochistan. Okay, now let us see which one is the 5th site. Fifth site is Harappan site. Harappan site. See this location, this Harappan site, this is actually, if we try to understand this location should be placed here, and this was Manda. But since the proper location is not marked in the map and you have to write something, then you can write Manda. Manda is the northmost location of Indus Valley civilization. Then let us see the 6th site. Sixth is proto-historic and historic site. 6th one, this is located here. And see, this proto-historic and historic site, this site is in Punjab, and it is Ropar. So if any site that you remember which is very close to this particular marked place, you can write that also, and most probably UPSC gives marks in that. Let us see another site. Another site is, all these are done. Inscriptional site. In this inscriptional site, which is located in the map, which is the 7th site, we have to find this site. This is located in Uttar Pradesh, or it can also be called as Ayodhya. Ayodhya is also a probable option. This is Sohagara. This is inscriptional site. They have asked about this site in PT also, in GS. Sohagara copper plate. The inscription, a very important inscription in the Mauryan period. Then the next site, let us see. Jain monastic site. Jain monastic site, which is the 8th site. Jain monastic site, 8th site. This here. This is a particular place, and this is a famous place, Jaina place, Udayagiri. and Khandagiri, Udayagiri, Khandagiri. This is the place which is mentioned, Jain monastic site. Then the next site is ninth one. Coin hoard, where this coin hoard was basically seen, and this is here, this ninth one. This is Song. This is a place which is, famous for coin hoard. Then let us see the 10th site. 10th is Paleolithic. 10th is Paleolithic. And this is here, this Paleolithic site. See, the Paleolithic site here which is mentioned is 𝐶𝐤𝐬. This is a Paleolithic site, very important site. Then the next site is, let us see, after 10th, 11th is Terracotta Site. Terracotta Site. This is 11th. Okay. 𝐿th is Terracotta Site, and this site is 𝐃𝐫𝐬𝐬. Always UPSC ask about this. In PT also we have found the question related to this. 𝐶𝐃𝐫𝐬𝐬, very important. As if UPSC is in love with these sites. They keep on giving such sites very often. Then after this, 12th. 12th is basically the rock cut caves. Rock cut caves. This is basically the site. 12th is, and this is Bhimbetka in Madhya Pradesh, famous for prehistoric paintings. Bhimbetka is the site. See, one thing you need to remember, that these sites, the map work should be done along with the course, chapter wise. Like if you study prehistoric period or Indus Valley civilization, like I did in the class, as per the topic, Mauryas, post-Maurya, Gupta, post-Gupta. So in that case, you will see that, or the sites associated with painting or rock cut caves sites, or architectural sites, all these sites are important. And when we were doing map, I have shown it to you in the batches that I took. Now let us see which is the another site, rock cut. Ancient Learning Center, that is 13. Ancient Learning Center, 13th site. This is basically the site which is located in Gujarat, and this is a very important center, Valabhi. And this is also famous for educational, and Valabhi is also famous for Jaina Council that has happened. Then the 14th, Political and Cultural Center. 14th, Political and Cultural Center. Let us see. This is the site, Political and Cultural Center, and this is Sirpur. Very frequently UPSC asks about this site. and this is a political and cultural center site, Sirpur. Then another 15th is, let us see 15th. What is the 15th site? Buddhist site. The Buddhist site, let us see the map. 15th. This is the site basically. This is 𝐈𝐀𝐒. 𝐈𝐀𝐒. So in all the sites you have to write certain things, certain important, features, very important, very specific feature of that particular site in 30 words. Okay. Then 16th is ancient port. Ancient port. Let us see the 16th site, which is this is 17th, this is 16th. 16th is ancient port, and this is Bharuch. This is Bharuch or Broch. This is a very important port. When we were doing trade in ancient India, I have mentioned about this in the class. Okay. Then 17th, early historic site. Early historic site. This is 17th basically. The early historic site here is, there are two sites that can be mentioned. One is Adichanallur or Madurai. Adichanallur would be appropriate. Adichanallur would be appropriate site. So this is basically the early historic site. Then 18th. Then 18th is what they have asked, Ivory Hoard. Ivory Hoard. See, Ivory Hoard here, this is Bamiyan, probably. Bamiyan. And a very close option will be Bagram. या Bagram. This is a place where ivory hoard was found. It is very important site. Now what is left? 19th. Let us see 19th. 19th is Buddhist Monastic Center. This is basically the site, Buddhist Monastic Center, and this is Sompura, famous for Sompura University. Sompura. This is a very important site which is located here, and the last site, which is the 20th site. Let us see what they have asked. That is Temple Complex. Temple Complex. This is Kedarnath. Kedarnath. So these sites that they have asked in the exam, you have to mark the site, and they have given you the hints, and you have to write few things about the site. For example, if they asked, Bhimbetka, so Bhimbetka, it is famous for rock cut paintings, and even Mesolithic tools were found there, and Mesolithic rock paintings are found, famous for that. Langnaj, for example, I told you. Then Reningunta, I told you. Then Sohagara, for example. Sohagara was also an important site which is located in Uttar Pradesh, and it is in Gorakhpur. Okay, so these are the important sites and very common site, except for few, one or two sites. Most of the sites are very easy, and they keep on repeating from the previous year's paper. Some of the sites, for example, Dow Jalu Harding or Roper or Manda, they keep on asking Mehergarh, Langnaj, they keep on Ataripakkam, Adichanallur or Madurai, a closer site to this particular site. So you have to write a particular, feature in this, and one should always study the map along with the topic. जो भी टॉपिक पढ़ रहे हैं उसके साथ साथ पढ़ते जाइए ताकि you will have a fair idea about it, and separately also you can practice on these sites. So it keeps on practicing, and when I was doing in the class, I have mentioned about the sites when the last year when I was teaching ancient India, and most of the sites were done in the class itself. So the question in the map work was not that difficult, and they have asked very simple question this year. Other questions were also very direct question. They were not difficult question. Let us come to the question. The second question: do you agree that ecological factors influenced the flow and ebb of the Harappan civilization? Comment. This is 20 marks question. It has two keywords. One is the flow and other is the ebb. Ebb is decline. Ebb, बोलते ना lowest ebb. And how these are influenced by ecological factors. That means ecological factors were responsible for the rise of this civilization, and ecological factors were responsible for the decline of this civilization. This is what we need to understand कि ecological sites कैसे responsible थी और कैसे responsible नहीं थी. This is the question is asked in this particular, this question has two parameters. One is basically the rise of the civilization, that is the flow of the civilization, and the another is basically the decline of the civilization. So a student should always understand that what all things you need to write in this particular question. First of all, we take the rise of the civilization. So in the rise of the civilization or the flow of the civilization, how the recent archaeological excavations carried out, which was carried out in the northwestern part of Indian subcontinent, and in some areas of India, which has given information about how the ecological factors were responsible for it. There were archaeologists by the name of Walter Fairservice, Stuart Pigott, and Bridget Olchin, G.F. Dales. They have carried the work on these factors. D.P. Agarwal and A.N. Ghosh, they also gave the idea about such evolution, such basically the theory of indigenous origin, in which they have discussed about such things. So around middle of the 4th millennium BC, some of the people moved into the Indus region, and favorable conditions provided by the Indus River. So what all features which were responsible for the development of this site, of this civilization? The Indus and its tributary prepared the extensive fertile flood plain which provided the base for agriculture. This is a very important, the climatic condition that has provided solid base for the development of this civilization, that is the flow of this civilization. That means ecological factors plays a very dominant role, and especially in the evolution of the agriculture. When agricultural surplus that rose, it gave rise to the other things. With agricultural surplus, the production goes high, and secondary economic activities and urbanization and other things also develops. So ecological factors, climatic condition, agricultural condition and created a material base, because see, material base was already created from the Neolithic period. This is what the basis of the gradual theory of gradual origin is based on. And availability of the proper water facilities and the proper climatic condition, the Indus and its tributary, how it was providing a base for such development, agricultural development. So the process of evolutionary growth represented the emergence of a mature phase of a civilization that developed in 2300 BC. So in this rise of civilization, how agriculture played a very important role. तो इसमें आपको rise में ये लिखना है कि कैसे ecological factors that were beneficial for the rise of the civilization. The first part that you will mention this. The second part is demanding that how the decline of the civilization happened and how ecological factors were responsible for the decline. There, see, decline of the Indus Valley civilization is a debatable topic among the scholars, and scholars has opined and given different opinion that what are the important reasons for the fall of the civilization, fall of or the decline of the civilization. See, if you observe the recent archaeological excavations, those recent archaeological excavations has brought to light the decline of the Indus Valley civilization, and it was not a sudden phenomena, it was a gradual decline basically. And the decline of the Harappan centers are the result of the ecological imbalance. So ecological imbalance plays a very important role. The geological and climatological conditions plays a very important role, and this theory of ecological imbalance was given by Walter Fairservice, and there was another archaeologist, R.L. Steen and A.N. Ghosh. They all gave such opinion. So according to the theory of ecological imbalance, there was intensive cultivation that was done by the Harappans over a period of time, and because of that intensive cultivation there was depletion of the fertility of soil, and excessive cutting of the trees, which caused the deforestation was caused, and finally there was the emission of so much of carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, and the trees were also not there. So this created a condition of climatic change, global warming, etc. So ecological imbalance happened, and over a period of time it started declining. धीरे धीरे करके वो सारी चीजें decline कर गई. See, there are other factors also. When the agriculture, the civilization declined with the decline in the agriculture and foreign invasion and other things, there are lots of debate. It is a polemical issue basically, the Indus Valley civilization. See, ecological factors that resulted into the development of agriculture, agricultural growth, which resulted into surplus production, then expansion of the economic activities, growth of population, emergence of new settlement, then growth of a distinct cultural pattern, and it gave rise to a civilization. The same thing was becomes a reason for the fall also. It becomes a reason for the fall, that how the ecological factors were responsible for the decline of the civilization. That there was drying up of Ghaggar-Hakra river system, extensive deforestation, resulting into floods and scarcity of wood for making the tools and implements, intensive grazing of the Himalayan food plains, which resulted into soil erosion and sedimentation of water channels, increase in the salinity of soil, then over-exhaustion of the resources, mismanagement of the resources. So all these resulted into the fall also. So two factors that you have to write here. कि कैसे इकोलॉजिकल फैक्टर ने सिविलाइजेशन को बनाया है, कैसे एग्रीकल्चर डेवलप किया, सेकेंडरी इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज डेवलप की और एक सिविलाइजेशन का डेवलपमेंट हो गया, कल्चरल पैटर्न का डेवलपमेंट हो गया। और जैसे ही इकोलॉजिकल फीचर्स ने, फैक्टर्स ने अपना चेहरा बदला, एंड देन द सेम सिविलाइजेशन विच वाज बिकॉज ऑफ द इकोलॉजी agricultural development rose and it became the first urban civilization, the same feature started declining with the passage of time because of the ecological factors. The ecological factors plays a very, very important role. See, there was a shift of the course of Indus, drying up of the river Ghaggar and Hakra bed, and there was erratic rainfall. And it created the scarcity of the natural water for Harappans. And under these conditions, they have to resort to lift irrigation, and this depletion of resources resulted into the fall of civilization because they have to depend on some other aspects. So the theory of ecological imbalance seems to be more, plausible theory, more adequate theory in the recent studies of the decline of the Indus Valley civilization. And it is the most acceptable theory which was accepted by the historians. तो इससे क्वेश्चन पहले भी वो बना चुके हैं, Indus Valley civilization. But the new thing that they have asked was the rise of civilization. How there was a rise of civilization with the, how ecological factors were responsible. But same thing, ecological imbalance and, over exploitation of the environment that resulted in the decline of the civilization, and how, the scholars like Fair Service, they have explained such problem in the decline of the environment. तो इन लोगों ने सबने जो है बताया कि पॉपुलेशन बढ़ गया, पॉपुलेशन की वजह से एग्रीकल्चर पे बर्डन आया, और उसके बाद फिर फेयर सर्विस बोलते हैं कि पॉपुलेशन बढ़ने की वजह से जो डिपेंडेंसी है रिसोर्स पे वो बहुत ज़्यादा हो गया, और जो डेलिकेट बैलेंस बनता है इकोसिस्टम में, इकोलॉजी में, वो डिस्टर्ब होना शुरू हो गया, एंड दैट हैज़ क्रिएटेड प्रॉब्लम्स. And there was fast depletion of, you can say, the scanty forest and food and resources that on which the people were dependent upon. Agriculture was done on a piece of land for over and over again, and that caused the soil fertility also, the decline of the soil fertility also. So fair service theory seems to be most plausible one. Fair service, जिसने ये theory दिया, theory of ecological imbalance. So ये question बहुत मुश्किल नहीं है. It is not a difficult question. It is an easy question, you can say. तो इसमें दो aspect आपको लिखना है कि ecological factor, how it led to the flow or rise of the civilization, and in the second is the decline of the civilization. And I am sure that you must have mentioned the name of the historians and archaeologists who opined on, or who gave their opinion on their research, or on the basis of their studies. Next question. Do you consider that Upanishadic principles embody the high point of Vedic religious thought? So this question, the last question, was from Indus Valley civilization. This we cover in the class meticulously. This is from Vedic age, and it also can be clubbed in the sources to ancient Indian history. Vedic age से ये question पूछा है. That means it is based on Upanishad. How Upanishadic principles, how it embodied, how it was, how it plays an important role. See, Upanishad, if you try to understand, Upanishad is written in the later Vedic period, and we discuss in the class about it, have discussed in the past. Upanishad literally means, sit around Guru, or a teacher. And this is the literal meaning of Upanishad, and there are 108 type of Upanishad. And Upanishad, mainly, revolve around two fundamental concepts, that is Brahma and Atma. So the question says that how Upanishadic principles embody the high point of Vedic. See, Upanishad is considered as the basis for the philosophical development in India. It is the basis of the philosophical development. जो भी philosophical development हुआ है इंडिया में, it is because of, the main role was played by Upanishad. Upanishad का एक बहुत major role है इसमें, जिसमें कि Upanishadic principles, embody the epitome of the Vedic thought. And the final culmination of Upanishadic thought was basically, interpreted in various Upanishads in the later Vedic period. There are 108 types of Upanishad, and in some of the Upanishad, it is being interpreted. And the philosophy which later developed was called as Vedanta. वेदांता की फिलॉसफी, वेद का अंत हो गया, उपनिषद आ गया. उपनिषद is an interpretation of the Vedic text. It is, Vedanta means, the culmination of the Vedic thoughts, which is also called as Uttara Mimamsa. Uttara Mimamsa. Uttara Mimamsa. Vedanta or Uttara Mimamsa. So, they reflect, the Upanishad reflect different ideas about Atma, about Brahma, okay, and the world, the statesman, the concept of, the Tattvam, and Aham Brahma Asmi, I am Brahma, and then it also reflects the concept of Brahma, Atma, okay, which is non-dualism of Brahma and Atma, that is the Brahma Atma 𝐏𝐸𝐬𝐬, Brahma Atma 𝐏𝐸𝐬𝐬. So it reflects a philosophy. It reflects a philosophy, non-dualism of Brahma and Atma, and it can be interpreted into different ways. Bhagavad Gita, which is written in the Gupta period, and Bhagavad Gita incorporated some of the aspects of Upanishadic principles with the doctrine of advocating the righteous action of karma, righteous action, that is karma. And in Upanishadic thought, one of the prominent scholars, or one of the prominent saint of the Vedic philosophy was Shankaracharya, and he was there in the 9th century in India, who propounded the theory of Advait Vedanta, which is called as monistic, the theory of monistic. And according to this theory, according to Shankaracharya, there is only a single unified reality, that is Brahma, and everything else appears to be a myth. Brahma ही एक reality है, बाकी सब myth है. This is what Shankaracharya says. And he is a saint and a scholar of highest eminence, you can say. On the other hand, there exists a pantheistic, stand also. And in this, pantheistic stand of Upanishad, this says that Upanishadic thought which identifies the universe with Brahma. So Upanishad is a very important source for philosophical development. Upanishads are also seen as anti-sacrifice, because the later Vedic period came under severe criticism because of the complex rituals and the deadly sacrifice which was there. For example, there is a Upanishad called as Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It mentions that the performance of the sacrifice leads to world of fathers. But but acknowledge leads to the world of gods. So there are different references in which, Upanishad criticize. See, Upanishads were also written by Brahmins. Later Vedic period, which came under severe criticism, is being actually criticized by the Upanishad, which was written by, which is a very important interpretation. So the references in which, the philosophy of that period is given. So if you try to understand in nutshell, Upanishad are philosophical text dealing with the topics like, universal soul, or you can say the absolute individual self, origin of the world, the mysteries of nature, and so on. So they mark, the culmination of Indian thought in Vedic period. So Upanishad basically criticize the rituals and they lay stress on the value of, knowledge or value of right belief. This is what Upanishad is actually, indicating. So the question says, do you consider that Upanishadic principles embody the high point in the Vedic religious thought? Yes. You have to give references. Q. See, the basis of the philosophy in India is because of, Upanishad. So it is the interpretation of Vedas, Vedanta जिसको कहा जाता, Vedanta. So it has a great significance. So basically इसमें you have to write significance of Upanishadic principles, and it is a high point in the Vedic religious thought. That is how it is, gives rise to a philosophy. So this question was from Vedic age, and I have discussed about it in Vedic age as well as in the sources to study ancient Indian history. Now the next question is, analyze the significance of the external influences and indigenous development on the post-Mauryan art. This question is from post-Maurya. Post-Maurya is an important topic, and why this topic is important, because there is basically the rise of the the coming of the foreign ruling groups, the foreign invasion that has happened in this period, particularly in this period. And here it says that what were the important impacts? The question indicates what were the important impacts of the foreign contacts, or finally we can say that how this impacted, the impact of external attack that was done, and the foreign ruling groups, and they came and settled down. So the impact of the foreign contacts in India, it can be seen in different aspects, whether it is development of the new trade routes and improvement of trade and communication with China, development of the trade route, that is the silk trade which was going on that time, and then the strengthening of the idea of divine origin of kingship, then growth of Gandhara school of sculptural architecture, Mathura school of sculptural architecture. The foreign invasion that happened in post-Maurya period resulted, why it happened? Because there was no central authority. After the fall of the Mauryan Empire, there was indigenous dynasties like Sungas and Kanvas they rose, and finally there was foreign invasion, and the foreign ruling groups came and settled down in India. They got assimilated with Indian society, and there were influences that was being carried out. So introduction of a new element in the society, and that was called as fallen Kshatriya. As Indo-Greeks, and the other foreign ruling groups who came and they got associated with the Indian society. They were called as fallen Kshatriya, or in the other term it is called as Vratya Kshatriya. There was a sacrifice done called as Vratya Stoma. Through that sacrifice, the foreign invaders earlier were called as Malechas, but they were treated as fallen Kshatriya or second grade Kshatriya. So because of them, there was development and growth of Mahayana Buddhism. There was growth of the architecture which has the Greco-Roman influence. So the growth of sculptural architecture, whether it is Mathura or Gandhara school of sculptural architecture, and reflection of the Greek god Apollo in Gandhara school of architecture, then introduction of turban or trouser or heavy long coat or helmets, boots. These are introduction, but they ask in the exam that in this question they are specifically focusing towards post-Mauryan art. So this is not a new question. In the past also they have asked so many times about the post-Mauryan art, that is the Gandhara school of architecture and the Mathura school of architecture. And we find that this Gandhara school of architecture, which is also called as Greco-Buddhist school of architecture, and in this architecture we find the Greek techniques of art were applied to Buddhist subjects. See, when the foreign invasion happened, the foreign ruling groups, they got assimilated into Indian society and they accepted Buddhism because there was no place for them in the Brahmanical setup. And Buddhism was based on egalitarian principles. So there was, when they started, following Buddhism, and they started giving patronage to Buddhist architecture, especially the sculptural architecture, and we find their influence on the architecture. This is what the question demands. So you have to write some influences, general influences of the foreign contact in few words. At the same time, you have to focus on post-Mauryan art, that is the Gandhara school of architecture and Mathura school of architecture, that how the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, bear the resemblance to the Greek sculpture. How there is, realist, depiction of Buddha, different forms, different, postures, and in different types, it was, reflected in the different mudras. Buddha was reflected. So we have to understand in this case the Gandhara and the the Mathura school of architecture and how there was a foreign influence in that case. कि Greco-Roman influence किस तरह से था. This is what we have to understand, and it is not at all a difficult question because in the past also UPSC has asked such question. तो इसमें कुछ भी मुझे कोई difficult question नहीं लगता है because इसको आराम से हम लोग कर सकते हैं. This is what I have found, that this question is not at all difficult. So गांधारा को बताइए, गांधारा पे क्या influence है ग्रीको रोमन का, और मथुरा बताइए उस पे क्या इन्फ्लुएंस है, और उसको समझाते हुए explain the features of Gandhara, explain the features of Mathura school of architecture, how this sculptural architecture was very important and how they have depicted Buddha. So see, Gandhara school of art flourished in the northwestern part of India, in the region called as Gandhara, which is a very important site for sculptural architecture. And in this Gandhara school of architecture, different the images of Gandhara depicts the Hellenistic features. Buddha is depicted as God, because in Mahayana, what Mahayana says, that Buddha is not a teacher, he is a god and he was worshipped. So he was depicted like god Apollo. Apollo is a Greek god. And you know, great emphasis was given on the physical beauty. So you have to write certain features also which shows the Greco-Roman influence. So great emphasis was given on physical beauty, like, you know, curly hair, or, you know, the transparent, the typical feature of muscular body of Buddha. Images were, you know, gentle, graceful, compassionate. Images, you know, showing the emotional warmth, and it has the element of foreign origin. तो आप देखेंगे कि ग्रीक और ग्रीको रोमन और इंडियन कैसे फ्यूज कर रहा है. दिस इज व्हाट दे आर आस्किंग इन द एग्जाम. गांधारा कैसे रिफ्लेक्ट करता है, मथुरा कैसे रिफ्लेक्ट करता है, हाउ दे आर, you know, reflecting such architecture. In Mathura also, see, Mathura school of architecture, you know, it emerged in the 2nd century BC, and you know, it reached its peak in the 1st century AD. So that also has some kind of influence, that also was influenced, but main influence can be seen in the Gandhara school of sculptural architecture. So write a general impact and then, you know, focus on specifically on the post-Mauryan art. Post-Mauryan art पे फिर एकदम specific होकर के आप लिखना शुरू कर दीजिए. And this is what they have asked. इसी को उन्होंने पूछा है कि कोई भी बाहर से लोग आए, उन्होंने कैसे एक्सेप्ट कर लिया बुद्धिज्म को और बुद्धिज्म को पैटर्नाइज करने लग गए. तो इसको बहुत आसानी से लिखा सकता है. इट इज अ वेरी इजी क्वेश्चन. लेट अस टेक अ लुक ऑफ द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. This is, will it be proper to consider megalithic to represent a single homogeneous contemporaneous culture? What kind of material life and cultural system is revealed in megalithic culture? See, this megalithic culture is a topic that we have done. Megalithic culture, and I teach this in the topic when I do prehistoric age, Paleolithic and Mesolithic, Neolithic, Chalcolithic, and then Megalithic. And there I have explained this, and the question is not very difficult. You don't go on the length of the question. The question is clearly indicating that it says that, will it be proper to consider megalithics to represent a single homogeneous contemporaneous culture? What kind of material life? They are asking the features in context to material life and cultural system is revealed in megalithic cultures. Is revealed in megalithic. See, the term megalithic means a large stone structure, and such structures were, you know, explored by the archaeologists in the different parts of India and beyond IVC. Such stone, you know, culture is broadly divided into two categories, that is burials and, you know, commemoration. So the dead bodies, you know, were buried in the graves and, you know, surmounted by large number of large boulders of stone, and which is the basic characteristic of megalithic culture. Mega means big, culture is lithic is stone, so big stone culture. And if, you know, burials were surmounted, you know, by large piece of stone, it is termed as the megalithic. इसको megalithic हम लोग कहते हैं कि megalithic burials that is being you know, found beyond IVC and, you know, marked by the skeletons, you know, along with the several, you know, articles that was put inside, which, you know, provides an elaborate information about the subsistent pattern of the prehistoric art, whether it is in the northern, northeastern, and, you know, southern regions of India. See, if you try to understand the greatest authority to the work of, you know, megalithic culture is Neelkanth Shastri, who is a famous historian who writes on South India, and he has written a book, The History of South India, which is a very famous book. Neelkanth Shastri says that, you know, there was distribution of pastoral and farming culture outside the Indus Valley civilization. And he also says that there is a proper, megalithic material life and cultural system. So this is a very, very important feature of the megalithic culture. So according to 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐻 Shastri, there was the distribution of the pastoral and farming culture outside the Indus region, and it is being studied on the basis of archaeological remains. So the prehistoric, evolution of the people outside the Indus region, is similar to the evolution of the northern part of India. So the earliest phase, was marked by the use of, large stone tools. That is why it is called as megalithic. And, this phase, was marked by hunting and, food gathering, like we see in the case of the Paleolithic phase. So the Stone Age started later in that case. So in course of time, when the climate became warm and humid, the development of such culture was seen. And especially in the Mesolithic period, we find microliths that was being used. So this phase of prehistoric culture is marked by similar Mesolithic phase of India's mainland, and it has shown the different trends, but it was in a single homogeneous and contemporaneous style that was seen in the megalithic system. So if you try to understand the hunting and gathering phase of the human evolution, it gave way to the farming culture outside the Indus Valley civilization. And that is why we see that this phase is termed as, Neolithic phase, and was marked by, polished stone tools like blade. And, see, megalithic culture was distinct from the prehistoric culture, though it developed late. Okay, but there are certain features which was similar. So megalithic culture was marked by distinct burial system, and that was surmounted by large stone. This is the unique and specific feature of the megalithic culture. So in this question, here in this question, in particular question C, you need to write the opinion of the 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐻 Shastri. So according to 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐻 Shastri, the megalithic culture, proved to be the foundation phase of South Indian history, and which began with the Sangam literature in the early centuries of the Christian era. So based on the foundation provided by the megalithic people in South India, defined the historical tradition that began around the early centuries of the Christian era. That is, the development of the Sangam age, the Pandyas, the Cheras and the Cholas. So the megalithic system basically represents all the features. So that is why they say that it is a single homogeneous and contemporaneous culture, and it finally became the basis for the civilization, that the period that developed, the Sangam period. Basically the Sangam period becomes the basis for Sangam period was the megalithic culture. At the same time, see, as far as the other part of the question, which says that what kind of material life and cultural system is revealed in the megalithic culture, all the points that it was a typical cultural pattern which emerged in the peninsular India in 1100 BC, and this cultural life was characterized by use of big stone boulders, and the megalithic cultural pattern was basically based on the settled village basically that was there, The megalithic people, they lived a settled life in villages. They cultivated, number of food grains such as barley, pea, lentil. They domesticate different animals like, sheep, goat, cattle. And, the material life that you need to focus here in the second part of the question, that material life of the megalithic period was quite developed because, of the different types of tools and the stone, the implements that was made of, in fact, of stone and iron that is being discovered. So there was use of, stone tools, there was use of iron implements, and there was use of black and red pottery also. That also shows or indicates some material basis or base for this kind of culture. So they use black and red pottery, and they have a developed material remains from the settlements of the megalithic sites, and they also have the temperament of colonizing the new areas because of the might of the iron weapons that they used to make. So this megalithic culture is a developed culture, and it has a proper material base. And we also see the megalithic caves that were located outside the habitat areas, and this indicates that megalithic period the people have the civic sense as far as the settlements are concerned. Moreover, we also find that there are Roman coins in the megalithic settlement that shows the Indo-Roman trade also, which later began in fact. So there was a proper material base that you need to write here. You have to write the features of the material base, material character of the megalithic period, and the cultural system as well. So as far as this period is concerned, the significance of the megalithic culture lies in the fact that it prepared the ground for Sangam age. इसीलिए तो Sangam age का basis बन गया ये. So this is not a very difficult question again. Two part. First part you will mention that how it was single, homogeneous and contemporaneous culture, and the second part you will write down the features of the megalithic culture कि क्या था feature, कैसे वो जीते थे, कैसे दूसरे एरियाज को कोलोनाइज करते थे, एग्रीकल्चर कैसा डेवलप था, स्टोन टूल्स यूज करते थे, आयरन इम्प्लीमेंट्स यूज करते थे. तो इस टाइप से आपको उसमें लिखना पड़ेगा. तो दिस इज नॉट अ वेरी डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चन. मेगालिथिक कल्चर पे ये क्वेश्चन था. लेट अस टेक अ लुक ऑफ द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. How would you characterize the nature of Mauryan state on the basis of Kautilya's Arthashastra? This is from Mauryan period. Very simple and very easy question. This we have done in the class in the nature of the state, nature of Mauryan state, and how Kautilya throws light on the nature of Mauryan state. So, इसमें only on the basis of Kautilya's Arthashastra. Arthashastra is a book on statecraft written by Chanakya or Kautilya or Vishnugupta, the main man behind the development of the system of administration of Mauryas. So the Mauryan state system, it represents a broad ideological, base which, can be perceived in the light of the subject matters of Arthashastra. At the same time, another source that throws light on the Mauryan state was the edicts of Ashoka. But as far as Arthashastra is concerned, you have to stick to the question. The Saptang theory, especially, the responsibility of the rulers, the principles of different kinds of control, you have to mention, which is there, specifically mentioned in Arthashastra, which was written by Kautilya. So you have to give the features of the Mauryan administration. Basically the question demands the feature of Mauryan administration in the light of Mauryan state system, in the light of the Arthashastra. As far as the features are concerned, according to Arthashastra, the Mauryan state system represented, a new trend of political system, and it was a new form of government, which was, generally termed as the imperial government. It, represent the triumph of the empire over the small political principalities or small political units. The idea of Chakravartin you have to mention. Chakravartin ka kya role hai? Then, Arthashastra describes the Chakravartin and Chakravarti Kshetra, which, refers to the sphere of, emperor's rule, and, it is significant to the Mauryan state system. तो एक नए किस्म का डेवलपमेंट हुआ Mauryan state system में. You can also, mention that, it reflects the imperial, fervor in the different spheres. It was an imperial state doing imperial exercise and colonizing areas. This was done by Ashoka and, his predecessors Bindusara and Chandragupta Maurya. But the main man behind the state system, the other sources were also, Megasthenes, written Indica, that also throws light especially on the municipal administration. As far as the most important feature of the Mauryan state is concerned, it has a centralized state system. The concept of, control, the most significant feature, or you can say the most significant nature of the Mauryan state was the concept of control, the absolute monarchical system. See, it was centralized, at the same time it was decentralized also. It has a grassroots level democracy also. So Mauryan state becomes the model state, and we study in public administration also about it, that it is one of the model state system that was developed by Chanakya. So the nature of control is suggestive of all encompassing kind of control. So it has a very, very important feature. State control represents the both forms of administration, both forms of control, in fact, horizontal control and vertical control. It has pyramidical control also. The important officials were appointed by the king himself, and they were accountable to king only, though there is a council of minister also. So there was absolute monarchy that was there. There was absolute monarchy. Mauryan state system represented a system of absolute monarchy in political and legal sense. It symbolizes the triumph of monarchy as as a political system during this period, and this reference is being given in Arthashastra. Arthashastra writes a great deal on how there was monarchical system that was established there. But we need to understand that this monarchical system, it has a new kind of orientation. Ashoka gave monarchical system a new orientation, and we need to understand that absolute monarchy that is based on the strong ideological base, and the new orientation represented a new consciousness of the king, which was king's specific responsibility, which was towards the subject, or parental responsibility. That was parental or paternalistic appearance of Ashoka, that the subject are the children and Ashoka is the father. Fatherly attitude. This was the new orientation to the absolute monarchical system. That was the specific feature of the Mauryan state system. And then there are other systems also, other features also, that Mauryan state system was despotic. The king was all powerful, unchallengeable, unquestionable, and is accountable to himself only, none other than anyone. It has, Arthashastra throws light that it was not only centralized, but it has other levels of administration. It has provincial and sub-provincial system also. Provincial and sub-provincial administration was highly developed state in the Mauryan state system. The empire was divided into, number of provinces, and the empire which was divided into number of provinces, and Kumara Matya, or you can say the Aryan Putra, was head of the provincial administration. Pradeshika was the head of the district administration, and he was assisted by two important officials who were Rajuka and Yukta. There is also a village level administration which indicates, or municipal administration above that, which indicates the local administration. So it was centralized, it was decentralized, it was absolute monarchical system. At the same time, it has welfare character as well. So the Mauryan state system was a very, very important development in ancient India. The welfare character of the state system, the welfare state that we have in today's time, in the light of DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy, India is a welfare state. In that time also, India was having a welfare state in the case of Maurya and Mauryan state, and the references were given by Arthashastra. Imagine in that time, we have a grassroots level democracy. What West teach us that the genesis of the democracy comes from there, that we study Enlightenment ideas about democracy and other lofty ideals, liberty, equality, fraternity, and other things as far as the modern political system is concerned. And we had this democratic system not in Mauryan period but in the Vedic period, especially in Rigvedic period. So the references of our Shastra defines the nature and the scope of the state activities, and it represents some of the elements of the welfare state. The welfare state tha India, imagine kijiye aap, that there were features that how state takes the responsibility of the diseased people, of the orphans, of disabled, how the state takes the responsibility of the weaker section of the society, downtrodden, poor, how the state controls the gambling, prostitutions, and there is a strict regulation on such evil practice. Public utilities, were promoted, irrigation facilities were promoted, agriculture was given special attention, and that we see in the case of, when the battles and the wars were fought by Mauryans, the specific instruction was there to the soldiers that they should not destroy the agricultural fields. Imagine the references of the lake, Sudarshan Lake. So all this that we have studied also when I was teaching you the Mauryan state system, the arrangement done by the government, the measures against epidemics, fire, and safety against the theft, robbery. There were punishments that was being given to the people who get indulged into such activities. So Ashokan, the Mauryan state has a welfare feature. It has a welfare feature. Planting of trees, for example, conservation of environment. Today also we have one of the features of conservation of environment, Directive Principles of State Policy, and the fundamental duties. So it has, you have to write such important features, that it has a elaborative bureaucracy, complex elaborative bureaucracy. Mauryan state was characterized by developed elaborate bureaucracy, which is top heavy and pyramidal level bureaucracy. And there is a exhaustive list of the officials which is mentioned in Arthashastra. Arthashastra mention hai ye sari cheezein. Various officials find mentions like there were tirthas, there were mahamattas, there were adhyakshas. All these levels of officials which is mentioned there at vertical level, at horizontal level, at pyramidal level. So bureaucracy existed at all the levels. This is a unique feature. So the Mauryan state system, especially in the light of the Arthashastra written by Chanakya, is studied in today's time as a role model. Imagine, according to, Arthashastra, the officials were, appointed after a thorough examination, like we appear in the civil service examination, then we are recruited to the civil service, we become IAS, IPS, we get central service, etc. Group B, Group A. So in that time also examination pattern was there. So ये सब चीजें आपको इसमें mention करनी है. How the state is, what was the role of priest in political system? Priest plays a very important role. Purohit plays a very important role. Purohit is not only responsible for religious, instruction or religious function, but he has the politico-administrative function also. He is an advisor. He is an advisor. An important aspect of the Mauryan state system was the, was that, how the priest, bring the change in the system. And this is being given to the Brahmins, the spiritual advisor. Not only the spiritual advisor they remain in the Mauryan time, but they emerged as a political advisor as well. So the priest is not only a religious advisor, but at the same time he is the advisor to the king, that is political advisor. So in this question you have to write down the features associated with Kautilya's Arthashastra. What all features Kautilya's Arthashastra mentioned, you have to write that. So it is a very easy question, and it was done in the class. Okay, let us take a next question. How did Varna Ashrama Dharma manifest the increasing social complexities in Gupta and post-Gupta period arising from social and economic development? Basically, how this question indicates the social and economic, social complexities that developed in Gupta and post-Gupta period, which is the manifestation of the Varna Ashrama Dharma, and it is related to Gupta and post-Gupta period. See, the Gupta age was, the remarkable age of progress in all the aspects. We know that. And there where, the socio-cultural life was, characterized by predominance of Varna Ashrama Dharma. See, the Brahmanical outlook, dominated the social life. And Brahmins, enjoyed the highest social status. And the Guptas, they used to give a patronage to the Brahmins also, and they followed Brahmanical religion. Mainly they followed Vaishnavism. See, Gupta period was the age of, consolidation of the Sanskritic element, which is the part of the Indian culture. So the cultural system, presented the emergence of, Hinduism. So the nature and character of the family, was similar to the previous period. But we need to understand that the social stratification system, was characterized by the rigidity that developed. And how the Varna Ashrama Dharma is basically becoming a major impact for the rise of such system. See, Brahmins enjoyed the highest social status. This is very important. And in the next social status was Kshatriya. And the third was Vaishya, and fourth. But in this period, because of the economic development, Vaishya's position became important. Though Brahmins enjoyed a very high position. So the social life in the age of the Guptas, characterized by the emergence of, large number of caste, jati, which developed later, and, mixed caste based on the professions, basically. You see that there was a rise of the kayasth because of the land grant system that was going on in that period. Kayasth were scribe, and they used to act as a land record keeper. So you see the economic development in the Gupta period, how it is impacting the condition of the social system, how there is so much of complexities that develop. See, Gupta period was characterized by emergence of caste, and this caste is a new social group, and this caste is, he works as he has a function of record keeping. So in this question you have to mention what are the major complexities that developed in Gupta and post-Gupta period. In Gupta first you will write, and then you write in the post-Gupta period. In Gupta period, when you write the status of Shudras also. How status of Shudras, improved during this period because of the prosperity in the field of agriculture, arts and craft. Gupta period was a golden period. How there was prosperity in arts and craft, agriculture, how Shudra, were indulged in, all activities, all these activities. And because of their involvement into in the profession of Vaishyas, their status also rose. So there are, different type of complexities that develop. Why it is developing? Because of the changes in the social and economic system. So in Gupta period, you write about the Vaishyas, the Shudras. You can also write about the slavery system. You can also write about the condition of women, status of women. You see the status of women declined because, in a sense, when we see the first sati that was, found in the reference of Iran inscription in 510 AD, when sati was done by Prabhavati Gupta. So the condition of women was declining as in general sense, and the condition of widows were also not very good. So you need to write here the changes in the society in the Gupta period. You need to write about little bit about Devdasi system also, how Kalidas, who is a famous personality in Gupta period, a literary figure, how he writes about, gives the reference about Devdasi were found in the Mahakaleshwar temple in Ujjain. ये सब चीजें आपको मेंशन करनी पड़ेंगी. पोस्ट गुप्ता में आपको because of the social and economic changes, what happened in the socio-cultural system, what was the development in the socio-cultural system during this age. You see in the socio-cultural system, entered a new kind of phase, and that was a declining phase because of the decline in economy. See, in Gupta period the economy was rising. From 350 to 450 the economy was rising. So there was changes in the social aspect, and 450 to 550 the economy started declining. So again you see the downhill trends in the society. In the post-Gupta period, more decline in the society because of the emergence of the proto-feudal trends. So it gave rise to the downhill trends in the society also. And we find further, decline of the society. So you have to write the kind of social system. There was proliferation of caste that happened in the post-Gupta period. See, there was emergence of feudalism that you have to write. It has affected the social life in the post-Gupta period. तो एक तो गुप्ता पीरियड के बारे में लिखिए और एक post-Gupta period के बारे में लिखिए. See, the emergence of feudalism has adversely affected the social life in the post-Gupta period. The social status of a person, got linked with the control over land. And because of the landed elements, were given the higher social status. There was, decline in the economic activities because of the feudal trends that rose up. There was demonetization of economy and, the rise of the village economy or closed door economy, which had an impact on the downhill, on the society, giving rise to downhill trends. Since the economy will decline, the Vaishyas' condition also declined, and they become to the level of the Shudras. Fahin, when he visited India in the beginning of 6th century AD, he says that Vaishyas were prosperous, living in a prosperous condition, but their condition as such declined because the trade was declining, the economic activities was declining. And They later, when Al-Biruni comes, he says that the level of the difference of Vaishyas and Shudras were not there. It was blurred. So age was characterized by the different social complexities that you have to write. You have to write the status of women भी आप लिखिए इसमें थोड़ा बहुत. Okay, how it was declining, how the practice of sati became more popular, untouchability, all these kind of things that you have to mention. उसको mention किए बिना आप इसमें कुछ लिख नहीं सकते. You have to write such things in this. So you have to mention how Varna Ashrama Dharma manifest increasing social complexities in Gupta and post-Gupta. So you have to connect the Gupta economic and social system, economy and social system, and post-Gupta economy and social system. So इसको भी आप आराम से लिख देंगे. This was also discussed in the class. The political and economic needs of the rulers combined with economic and status needs of the merchant class together, provided the receptive cultural milieu in which Buddhism flourished. This is a very, tricky question, I will say, but very easy question. इसमें कुछ है नहीं. The question says that the political and economic needs of the rulers. जो ruler का political economic need है, and which is combined with the economic and status needs of the merchant class. It together provides a receptive cultural milieu of Buddhism. How Buddhism flourished because of these two factors. So the question you try to understand has two aspects. In fact, ये समझते हैं, दो एस्पेक्ट है क्वेश्चन का. एक पार्ट में आप ये बताइए, इन वन पार्ट यू विल राइट द एस्पेक्ट ऑफ द रूलर, एंड इन पार्ट टू यू विल बी राइटिंग द मर्चेंट्स एंड ट्रेडिंग क्लास. इनका क्या नीड था जो बुद्धिज्म ग्रो कर गया. See, rulers, with the later Vedic period, when there was amalgamation of the tribes and there was rise of Janapadas and Mahajanapadas, there was rise of monarchical system. So in the later Vedic period, the Brahmanical religion came under severe criticism, and the rulers were not happy with this Brahmanical religion because of the authority of the Brahmins that was rising, and there was no absolute power or sovereignty of the ruler. So for them, Brahmanical religion is not in consonance with their administrative system or political system. The yajna system, because see, Vedic religion, later Vedic period, it was criticized because of the animal sacrifice, complex rituals, and the dominance of the priestly class. See, the king's authority depends upon the tax, land revenue that he collects, the toll that he collects, the economic development that is done there, agriculture which develops, which creates the primary sector, and on the basis of primary sector, the secondary economic activities that depends. So the king, जो 6th century BC वाला है, he is tilting towards a non-violent kind of a religion. And you see, in reaction to the later Vedic system, there was rise of 64 heterodox sects, out of which Buddhism and Jainism rose to prominence. And we need to understand there was the role of iron that has played a very important, iron has played a very important role in clearing the forest and, bringing a large piece of land into cultivation. And this gave rise to agriculture and agricultural production, which becomes the basis of the secondary economic activities like trade and commerce and arts and craft. But at the same time, we need to understand why this Brahmanical religion was not accepted at that time. Because we need to understand the political need of the rulers. They wanted absolute monarchy. Their power is very important. And see, if you try to understand in Europe also, when church was dominating, what was happening? It was challenging the power of the ruler. That is why Reformation was promoted by the rulers that time. Enlightenment ideas was promoted by the rulers that time. They wanted territorial expansion. They wanted absolute monarchy. They were in support of the economic activities which can bring prosperity. And when the state is prosperous, they can have large army. And those large army can do imperial exercise with the military might by creating a strong administrative system. So Vedic religion was a Brahmanical dominance which was not accepted by the rulers in the 6th century BC. This is what they ask. And they started finding an alternative in which the interference is not there from the religious aspects. And that is why it becomes a political need. That is why you see Ashoka is favoring Buddhism. He is spreading Buddhism. He is spreading Buddhism. And when you see when the foreign invasion that happened after the fall of Mauryas, what happened? Maurya के time में जो foreign invasion हो रहा है, that is done, and the foreign ruling groups, they get assimilated with the Indian society. But those foreign ruling groups were not accepted by Brahmanical fold because they were considered as, the foreigners were considered as Malecha. So what happened? They got deviated towards Buddhism. So they accepted Buddhism. They started giving patronage to Buddhism. They started promoting Buddhism. So in the post-Mauryan period, they promoted Buddhism. In 6th century BC, they promoted Buddhism. In Mauryan period, Ashoka and others, they promoted heterodox sects. Like Chandragupta was promoting, was inclined towards Jainism. How Ashoka played a very important role. How much the policy of Dhamma was influenced, though it is a debatable topic that it was influenced by Buddhism or not. So see the Kshatriya, challenging the Brahmanical dominance, and you see the Mahavira and Gautam Buddha, they both were Kshatriya. They both were Kshatriya. Jatak stories also reflects about the Kshatriya challenging the Brahmanical dominance. Anath Pindak also, reflects about such activities. So this is what you have to write in how they have started promoting. Till the time of Harsha also you see, they started promoting how Harsha was influenced by Hyun Sang and he became a follower of Buddhism. Because it was, especially in the case of Maurya, it was a political need of the ruler. Then how it is a need of the merchants, economic and status needs of the merchants. See, with the rise of, you need to understand this. See, with the rise of, in the 6th century BC, when, iron becomes a very important feature, and how iron plays a very important role in clearing forest and how agriculture was developed. It gave rise to secondary economic activities. So Vaishya rose up and their economic status was, rising. But at the same time, they were behind in the social status. So they started following Buddhism because it was based on egalitarian system. And they were in 3rd number in the Brahmanical fold. So they started following the Buddhist, culture, Buddhism. So there was wide acceptance to Buddhism. Moreover, in Brahmanical religion, interest is not considered as good. And Buddhism and Jainism, they have no problem with interest, which is basically in consonance with trade, whether it is internal or external trade. Moreover, in Vedic religion, crossing of the sea is not, accepted. And trade has two aspects, external and internal trade. External trade, if the crossing of the sea will not happen, which is prohibited, then what will happen? Then the trade will not take place. So Vedic religion was not in consonance with the interest of the Vaishya class, the trading class. So they started following Buddhism. They started patronizing Buddhism. Getting the point? So traders, started promoting Buddhism. In the post-Mauryan period also we find the such development. It was a golden period of trade. Moreover, you have to write for social status, the Vaishya accepted Buddhism as it was based on egalitarian system. They also wanted some political status also. Kshatriya and Vaishya came on the same platform and they were against Brahmanical religion. Jatak stories, Jatak Kahaniya which is basically the mentions about the previous birth of Buddha, 550 birth of Buddha, and was shown in the Jatak stories. And more than 480 urban areas were shown that he was born, Buddha was born. That shows that how he is close to urbanization. That shows how he is close to Vaishya class. So Buddha was close to Vaishya. Social reasons were there. Buddhism developed in this case. Buddhism was developed in this system. So merchants and trading class की भी अपनी need थी तो Buddhism develop हुआ. Political rulers की भी अपनी need थी तो Buddhism develop हुआ. दोनों aspect को आप बता दीजिए. And it is a very general question which is related to mainly with Buddhism only. But it is a general question. It is a bit tricky question also. Let us see the next question. Large number of land grants in hitherto non-arable tracts invariably meant expansion of agriculture in early medieval India. How did the management of hydraulic resources, different types of irrigation works, facilitates the expansion of agriculture in this period? See, you have to write in this. This is basically mainly from Gupta and post-Gupta period. And in Gupta, see, you have to write here two things. One, that the land grant system that developed in the Gupta period, and non-arable land were meant for agricultural, because see, the lands were granted initially to Brahmins in the Gupta period, and they started, the Gupta followed Vaishnavism and they gave patronage to Brahmins, and later on we see that the lands were also granted to officers, and it were those lands which are granted for agricultural expansion. So you have to write about land grant system in this particular question and explain the land grant system in the Gupta and post-Gupta period, and in the second, that how the management of the hydraulic sources, that is different types of irrigation works, how it facilitates the expansion of the agriculture, that how irrigation was done in the case of canals, pond, well, rivers, and how agricultural development happened because of the irrigational facilities that was being provided, and how these areas becomes an important area. For example, 𝐾𝐨 develops an important area in the early medieval times, and 𝐾𝐨 is a very important area which is a Doab region, and where for which Pala Pratiharas and Rajputas, they had a tripartite struggle. So how there was a management of the resources, that is irrigation. So irrigation works को थोड़ा इसमें define कर देना है, and how it facilitates this expansion of agriculture in this period. So first you have to write about land grants, and second you have to write about the agricultural development because of the, you can say, because of the irrigation development of irrigation in this particular area. तो ये इस तरह से आपको इसमें mention करना है, which is not very difficult. You have to write 2 aspects in this. इसमें लगभग 2 aspect आपको लिखना है, which I am sure you will be able to do it. So it is not a difficult question, not very difficult, but it is a bit tricky, and it was mentioned in Gupta and post-Gupta period when I was teaching this topic. Let us take a look at the next question. Discuss the relationship between the emergence of literature in vernacular languages and formation of regional identities in the early medieval India. It has again 2 aspects: emergence of literature in vernacular languages. It is a question of early medieval India. Early medieval India. That how the regional literature developed. रीजनल लिटरेचर के बारे में यूपीएससी ने पूछ लिया है कि रीजनल लिटरेचर क्या है बेसिकली. The regionalization of Indian culture, it began with the emergence of regional kingdoms, and regional languages had the rich you can say the rich repositories of literature, which challenge the monopoly of the Sanskrit literature. For example, Tamil, Kannada, Telugu, Marathi, Bengali, Assami, Udiya, for example, they attained a specific regional identity. And the growth of various sects and various religious movements that happened, it also had given a great impact on this development of regional languages and literature. This is what is basically they are asking. Literature in vernacular language and formation of regional identity. Some of the founders of these sects did not write in Sanskrit. They did not write in Sanskrit at all, and therefore they express themselves in the regional languages. So it is not that only non-Brahmins were doing this. Even Brahmins amongst them, who knew Sanskrit, were eager to communicate with the people in regional languages. This is a very important feature. And the many saintly poets, they were inspired by these movements that was developing in the early medieval period. We find the traces of Bhakti movement. In fact, in the Chola period also we find the Chola period also the education was based on epics and Puranas, and those epics and Puranas were imparted in the temple discourse, and there were colleges and other institutions for higher educations, and there was development of the Tamil classics, and we find the regional literature. So we find that not too many books were composed in Sanskrit. So regional languages were given importance. Regional languages were given importance in this period. Senas, the Sena ruler, they gave greatest impetus to the development of Sanskrit literature. But at the same time, we also find the regional literature that was developed. So we need to write here the importance basically. किस तरह से ये पूरी तरह से how it was how this regional literature was creating their name, and it was becoming an important aspect in this period. तो इसको आप लिख सकते हैं, give some examples also, and you will be in a position to write this, and which is it is not a very difficult question. In the early medieval phase, in the early medieval period, we have studied. You have to write that this period was marked by distinct regional languages. संस्कृत के अलावा संस्कृत की जो वो इम्पोर्टेंस थी वो खत्म हो रही थी ड्यू टू द feudal sentiments, and we find the regional languages that is developing. in this period. चाहे वो कन्नड़ हो या और दूसरी लैंग्वेजेस हो, कन्नड़ लैंग्वेजेस है, Kannada acquired popularity. And we find the Kannada writers like, Pampa, Ponna, Ranna, all these, they translated Ramayana into Kannada. Kannada language was effectively, promoted in the 12th century, 12th century AD in South India, when Basawa, or, who was a very important, Bhakti saint in South India. So he also used Kannada. So we find that Basawa was against the dominance of the Brahmins in all spheres of life. He strongly, advocated the proper distribution of resources among all the sections of the society. And he wanted to establish a welfare state. बसावा भी जो है दूसरे लैंग्वेज में लिख रहा है. डेवलपमेंट ऑफ लिंगायत सेक्ट्स. अर्ली मेडिवल पीरियड और अर्ली मेडिवल इंडिया वाज मार्क्ड बाय द ग्रोथ ऑफ डेवलपमेंट ऑफ the regional languages as Hindi in North India. Or a very good example is Chand Bardai's Prithviraj Raso. So you give certain examples. Early medieval period, resulted into linguistic diversities, and that, continued the progress of medieval India, progress in medieval India, and which led to the rise of the regional languages like, Urdu, Punjabi, Telugu, etc. So it played a very important role. It cannot be ignored के यहाँ पर ये सारी चीजें नहीं हुई. तो इसको हम लोग बहुत अच्छे से लिख सकते हैं. रीजनल लिटरेचर पे है, and which is the part of medieval India. Basically they asked in section A, which is a generally asked question from ancient India, but yes, this was a good question, and you can write well in this, I am sure about it. So from the paper 1, section A is done. Section A जो है हम लोग कर लिए. The section B we will be doing. So let us take a look of the next question, which will be in the section B. Section B. Answer the following question in about 150 words each. That is 10 into 5. The question is, discuss the different stages of Indian feudalism and analyze its impact on Indian political system. See, this question is directly from feudalism. And we studied feudalism in early medieval India. But the question asks about the genesis of the feudalism. So here what you need to write, you have to write about feudalism and the genesis, the stages, the evolution of the feudal system. See, the feudalism is a concept, based on land and land rights. And the land rights, being the most important aspect of feudalism. And there was, establishment of the superior rights over the land. So there was the establishment of the superior right, or, there was subordination of rights of the groups associated with the land. So this feudalism, which is called as Samanta system, it's actually developed in the Gupta period. You can say the proto-feudal trends that developed in the Gupta period through the land grant system, which started in Gupta period, though the first land grant was done by Satavahanas to the Buddhist monk. So there was acquisition of various other rights and the authorities of politico-economic in nature. So this has developed in the Gupta period. So in the Gupta political system, and what was the nature of the Gupta political system, you need to write here. The early stage of the feudalism, the first thing that you need to mention, and the further there were, development of more land grants which was given to the officials. Initially it started with the land donation or grants to the Brahmins. And later in the post-Gupta period, how it became intense, and finally it created a basis for the development of, feudalism in the early medieval times. The major development of the early medieval period is feudalism. So you have to write Gupta period, post-Gupta period and early medieval period. See, there was also, so the question carries two things, different stages of Indian feudalism, and here you have to write Gupta, post-Gupta and early medieval period, and then impact on the Indian political system. This is the second part of the question. This is the second aspect of the question. See, feudalism is a very important phenomena in the early medieval period, and there were elements of continuity and change that continued from the Gupta and post-Gupta period, and it acquired a major shape, or you can say the proper shape, in the early medieval period. So the trends of the proto-feudalism continued to early medieval period, which actually developed in Gupta and post-Gupta period and acquired a characteristics of feudal. See, these trends acquired various new dimensions and new features during the early medieval period, and it represented the expansion and consolidation of the feudal trends in the early medieval period. So what happened? See, there was decline of trade and related activities, and there was an implication of this decline which was favorable for the growth of the feudal trends. There are political implications, which is the pinpoint of the question, the second part. The political structure is, you can say that is developed upon the land and land grants. This is the main thing that you have to mention. And then you have to write that there was development of hierarchical political system, which was marked by different levels of samant or samantas, and the head was a king. So there was development of decentralization of political system. The hierarchical political structure was also characterized by allegiance from below to top, which was shifting in the nature because of the power of the king to control them. And there was existence of politico administrative units which lost relevance with the passage of time. Role of bureaucracy lost relevance, and now it became very limited. The power of the absolute monarchy is going away. The centralized fiscal system, it also lost meaning with the passage of time in the feudal system. So there was change in the character of political system. There was change in the character of army, because the standard army, the standing army basically of the king, was added by the army provided by feudal lords during the wars and battles of the kings. So the authority of the king get diminished, and which gave rise to a heterogeneous army, the army of the king and the army of the feudal lords. So this was a political structure based on overlord subordinate relationship. This is how it happened. So you have to write the development of land grant system, and which becomes a very important factor for the rise of proto-feudal trends in Gupta period and post-Gupta period, and finally it took the shape in the early medieval times. And then you will be writing the political implications of this feudalism. Feudalism का पूरा political implications जो है आपको लिखना है, जो कि बहुत ही आसान है, कुछ है नहीं इसमें करने के लिए. तो वो तीनों फेज हम लोगों ने क्लास में भी करा था, और it is not at all difficult. So the stages is basically you have to write the evolution, and at the same time the political implications. So the two things that you have to mention here. So it is very easy question, not a difficult one. You can also give the opinion of R.S. Sharma and D.D. Kosambi also and Harbans Mukhia, though they are not focusing on debate, but yes, you can write few of the opinion in this case. Then the next question, do you consider Sultan Iltutmish to be the real founder of Delhi Sultanate? This question is directly and very easy question of Delhi Sultanate. Very important topic in the Delhi Sultanate topic in medieval period. See, here you have to write the role played by Iltutmish in the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate, and that is why Iltutmish was the main ruler, the real founder of the Delhi Sultanate. In fact, he was the first Sultan of Delhi Sultanate. He played a very, very important role in the foundation of Delhi Sultanate. Delhi Sultanate के foundation में इल्तुतमिश का क्या role है वो आपको बता देना है. See, as far as Iltutmish is concerned, Iltutmish was the successor of Qutbuddin Aibak directly, indirectly and directly, he was the successor of Aram Shah. So Iltutmish, there is no doubt about Iltutmish that he was very brave and courageous ruler. After his coming to the throne of India, he began to establish himself as a great ruler. And he defeated his adversaries, his rivals, Yaldus and Tajuddin Yaldus and Nasiruddin Qabcha. And himself personally proceeded against these enemies and defeated them. So for Iltutmish, the main target was to establish the rule. And he defeated all the rivals and he consolidated the administration of the Delhi Sultanate. See, according to K. Nizami, he opines that Iltutmish was in a position to reduce the influence of the ulemas, that is the men of pen, from the politics, and he did not consult them on many state matters. But this does not appear to be correct, because we do not find from the records that in any way the influence of religion over the state was considerably less. But Iltutmish was the founder. So what all things that Iltutmish did, this is what you have to write in the answer. So what are the important steps taken by Iltutmish? This is what you have to mention in the answer. कि क्या ऐसा role play किया है Iltutmish ने, that what is basically the function. See, as far as the historians are concerned, especially the Sir Wellesley Haig, he opines that Iltutmish was the greatest of all slave kings. In fact, it would not be right to say slave. They are belonging to Ilbari dynasty, and his achievements, Wellesley Haig says that his achievements were hardly equal to that of his master. But he never had, as Aibak had, the moral and material support of a great empire. As far as ABM Habibullah is concerned, ABM Habibullah, who writes a very important book in this period, ABM Habibullah is a historian, and he also gives opinion about Iltutmish, and he says that Iltutmish was a remarkably successful person and he has a successful reign. He took Aibak's unfinished work and he played an important role in the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate. So he eliminated all the important, enemies and consolidated the administration. He created, the 40 Turkane Chehelgani, which was the base of the administrative structure of Delhi Sultanate. The historian that time, Minhajus Siraj, also, says that there is no, Sultan as Iltutmish who has got, virtues, kind-hearted. He was a person with administrative acumen, and he writes in his book Tabqat-e-Nasiri. 𝐾 writes about Iltutmish that he was an outstanding ruler of medieval India, and he was shrewd, he was cautious, he was, statesman who has a far sight. Professor 𝐾 writes elaborately about Iltutmish. He left, Nizami says that he left a permanent, mark on the canvas of the Indian history. He was a person, who gave the country a capital, an independent state, a monarchical form of a government, and a governing class. He developed the administrative system. He developed the administrative behavior of Delhi Sultanate. So he plays a very important role in the establishment of Delhi Sultanate. So he was a real founder. Real founder refers to a person, who provides the foundation of the state, kingdom, empire. And Iltutmish was a person who safeguarded Delhi Sultanate from internal and, external challenges. And he was a person who provided the solid foundation to the Turkish rule in India. It cannot be ignored. So, because of his policies, because of his role, the Delhi Sultanate was founded. When Iltutmish, sat on throne, the Turkish rule was in a very infant stage. It was in a very precarious stage. Qutbuddin Aibak founded the Turkish rule, but he was not the Sultan. And when he died, after the death of Iltutmish, the condition of Delhi Sultanate was very precarious. And it was Iltutmish who laid the solid foundation of the Mughal, of the Delhi Sultanate. He developed the military basis of Turkish rule. He developed the solid administration of Delhi Sultanate. He was successful in, in transforming the loosely patch up parts which, was inherited to him. He developed a governing class. Iltutmish recognized, those areas which had declared the independence from Delhi Sultanate after the death of Aibak, Qutbuddin Aibak. And he captured those areas, whether it is, Ranthambore or Ajmer, these places he captured. He suppressed the rebellion. He suppressed the rebellion of Badaयूं. He suppressed the rebellion of Banaras, Kannauj. Iltutmish saved the Delhi Sultanate. Iltutmish, saved the Delhi Sultanate from Mongol threat. And a very important incident was of Jalaluddin Mangbarni, who asked for asylum from Iltutmish when Chengiz Khan a Mongol was chasing. And how diplomatically Iltutmish handled this, saying that the climate is not good, so we are not able to help you. Diplomatically he avoided, because in case he would have helped, Jalaluddin Mangbarni, who was being followed by, Chengiz Khan was chasing him. This could have brought Delhi Sultanate under the threat given by Chengiz Khan. So Iltutmish provided a solid administrative, system in Delhi Sultanate. He was the person who reorganized the Iqta system. And the Turkane Chehelgani, that is the 40. He developed military system. So all this, he improved economic condition of Delhi Sultanate. He issued, the the coins called as tanka, jital. So in all the aspects, he was a person who provided patronage to art and architecture. Qutub Minar, which was, completed by him. Jami Mosque was built at Budayu by him. So all these things was done by Iltutmish. He transferred the capital from Lahore to Delhi. Lahore was the capital of Delhi Sultanate during the time of Aibak. So he was a very, very efficient person. It cannot be denied. He was a very, very important person. He played a very important role in the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate. So you need to write here the significance of the, Iltutmish, the role of Iltutmish, because he was the real founder of Delhi Sultanate. Identify the different categories of Persian literature which emerged from Delhi Sultanate. See this, we do it in sources to medieval India. We do it in historiography. In the Delhi Sultanate and in Mughal period. So, but specifically it asks about the categories of Persian literature in the Delhi Sultanate period. See, Delhi Sultanate, was a very important development, the establishment of Delhi Sultanate, and it was marked by the development of literary activities, especially the Persian literature. See, in order to, ensure a common political identity of Delhi Sultanate, Persian was adopted as an official language. And the purpose of adopting this language, as an official language, was to show the respect towards Caliphate of Baghdad. बगदाद के खलीफा है, उनको एक रेस्पेक्ट देने के लिए पर्शियन को एक जो है लैंग्वेज की तरह अडॉप्ट किया, which was most important language of West Asia. So Sultanate was marked by heterogeneous composition in this respect, in the respect of people and regions. So it reflects a very important, the importance given to this language. See, in the royal court of Delhi Sultans, where the patronage was given to the Persian literature, and several works began to be written and compiled in this 13th and middle of 13th century, and the literary figure like Amir Khusru played a very important role. Amir Khusru was a person who mastered the language of Persian in his childhood, and he emerged as a great literary figure. The most distinctive feature of Persian writing of Amir Khusru was Indianized form of Persian language, in fact. And he did not imitate Persian from Iran, but added words from Indian languages, and it gave it the indigenous form. And this style was called as Sabak-e-Hind. Sabak-e-Hind. So Amir Khusru was very well known, and he was known for the poetry writing. He wrote several poetry works which was called as Masnavis basically. And these works played an important role as a historiography, as Amir Khusru was first-hand witness of what was happening in Delhi Sultanate period, especially in 13th and 14th century. The first Masnavi as far as Amir Khusru is concerned was Kiran-us-Sadayan, and it throws light on the dialogue between the Bughra Khan and his son Kaiqubad. इसी तरह कई सारी मसनवी लिखी. द सेकंड मसनवी वाज मिफ्ताहुल फुतह. मिफ्ताहुल फुतह वाज द सेकंड मसनवी एंड इट मेंशंस द achievements of Jalaluddin Khalji. Khazainul Futah was which gives which is a very comprehensive masnavi, and it throws light on the political and territorial expansion of Alauddin Khalji. So various masnavis were written during the time of Delhi Sultanate in Persian, and it was written by Amir Khusru. Amir Khusru, titled Tughlaqnama, and he describes the brief role of Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट वर्क जो अमीर खुसरू का था वो नूह सिफिर था, 9 skies. अमीर खुसरू इसमें क्या एक्सप्लेन करते हैं? His deep patriotism towards India on 2 reasons, that India is a land of his birth, and his devotion towards the land of his birth. This is a very important development. Amir Khusru, composed several works. Deval Rani, Khizr Khan, Ashika. Amir Khusru was the disciple of a very famous Chishti saint, Khwaja Nizamuddin Aulia. In his praise also he has done so many works, especially Qawwali was the work, especially in the field of music. So there are developments that was done in this period. So you have to mention what all things that was done. You have to write about the the major figures of Persian poetry, Amir Khusru, his work, Masnavi, and you also need to write here about Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi, which was Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi was a very important work by Maulana Ziauddin Burmi, and he was a Persian scholar, and he has written a very important work that was Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi, and it is a very important source for the history of Delhi Sultanate. And there you find idiomatic phrases which flow from him in the conversation, and that describes various aspects of Delhi Sultanate. Fatwa-e-Jahandari was also one of the work. So you need to mention the type of Persian literature that developed in Delhi Sultanate. कि क्या है, तारीख-ए-फिरोज शाही के बारे में बताइए, फतवा-ए-जहांदरी के बारे में बताइए. Then the development, various development done in the different dynasties. So give references to such work, describe little bit about them, and especially mention Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi and by Ziauddin Burmi and Amir Khusru's work. Then there was another person by the name of Fakhruddin Qawwas. He was a contemporary of Alauddin Khalji, and he was a person who wrote Faranghe Qawwas. Faranghe Qawwas was written by him, and it was the earliest Persian dictionary that was composed in that time. A very interesting dictionary was Miftahul Fuzala. Miftahul Fuzala was a very important dictionary, and it was composed by Muhammad Shadi Badi, and this also is a very important expression of the Persian literature that was developing in that time. So give references, give the categories also, how this has happened. तो ये भी बहुत मुश्किल नहीं है. You have to give examples and you have to discuss what all type of Persian literature that developed in the Delhi Sultanate period. Let us take a look of the next question. Examine the cause of Babur's success against Ibrahim Lodi in the first battle of Panipat. Very easy question from Mughal Empire. सीधा पूछ रहा है कि क्या वजह थी बाबर की जीत क्यों हुई फर्स्ट बैटल ऑफ पानीपत में. आखिर क्या वजह थी जो बाबर जीत गया फर्स्ट बैटल ऑफ पानीपत. सी बाबर was victorious in the battle of Panipat, in the first battle of Panipat in 1526 when he fought with Ibrahim Lodi. And there were reasons, like for example, scientific combination of cavalry and artillery. Babur's victory was because of the scientific combination of cavalry and artillery. Then the effective use of the mobile cavalry and the skill with that he learned with Ustad Ali and Mustafa, who were the two important Turkish gunners. So his scientific combination of cavalry और artillery दोनों का mix जो है वो एक बहुत important factor बन जाता है. Then there was disunity among the Indian rulers. The Indian rulers did not visualize any eventuality beyond the borders of their kingdom, and they could not stand unitedly in front of the foreign invasion that has happened from outside. So Babur defeated them one by one and captured their kingdoms and became their overlord. Then the third factor that you can write here is the personality of Babur. One of the biggest cause of Babur's victory was his impressive personality. He did not lose heart even in the most critical times. हार नहीं मानने वाला बंदा था वो. And he had the capacity to infuse that courage and spirit in the dead bodies. इतना ज़्यादा वो मतलब इस तरह का वो बंदा था. And he was a born general. He was a person with full courage, with to fight in a very precarious condition with all perseverance. Then his army was disciplined. Army काफी disciplined थी. Then there was inefficiency of Ibrahim Lodi as a general. This was also a very important thing. Ibrahim Lodi एक बहुत ही inefficient general था, and he lacked the qualities of generalship. This also gave an opportunity to Babur to defeat him. Then Ibrahim Lodi was also using elephants. This was also a reason that you can mention in the answer. Then all these factors, Babur's formation of the techniques, military techniques, Tulughana, Babur took a strategic position when he reached Panipat. He strengthened his position by resting on one wing of his army in the city of Panipat, and the Tulughana technique that was used by him. Babur calls his device and device as an Ottoman device, Ottoman Empire, and it was used against the rivals. So historians praise Babur for his courage, for his formation, which was very offensive as well as defensive. Tulughana's strategy of war was very much praised by the historians, and which became a reason for the victory of the Babur. So ये बहुत आसान है, simple है. You need to write 9 points. That's it. It will be done. Next question. Discuss the attitude of Chishti saint towards the state. How were the Sohrawardi saints different from the attitude of towards the government? कुछ नहीं पूछ रहा है. It is a question of Sufi and Sufi movement. Bhakti and Sufi movement एक topic है. उसमें हम लोग करते हैं. एंड इन सूफी मूवमेंट द एटीट्यूड ऑफ चिश्ती ऑर्डर्स एंड सोहरावर्दी ऑर्डर्स. आप मेन चीज समझ लीजिए कि चिश्ती ऑर्डर वाज नॉट क्लोज टू द स्टेट मशीनरी, बट सोहरावर्दी ऑर्डर वाज वेरी क्लोज टू द स्टेट मशीनरी. सो दो पार्ट में इसको लिखना है, चिश्ती एटीट्यूड टुवर्ड्स द स्टेट एंड सोहरावर्दी एटीट्यूड टुवर्ड्स द स्टेट. सी, as far as the चिश्ती एटीट्यूड, चिश्ती एटीट्यूड को अगर हम लोग समझेंगे कि चिश्ती का क्या एटीट्यूड, कि चिश्ती एटीट्यूड, the Sufi, saints who belong to Chishti order, they were not, keeping any kind of links with the state machinery. They believed that the government service, distracted them from their mysticism, distracted them from their single-minded pursuit, and so they kept themselves away from the state machinery, and they were not keeping, in touch with the state system. See, according to them, the state system, the closeness with the state system or receiving gift from them will cause a kind of distraction. See, the entire, court life and the governmental organization, breathe, an atmosphere that was away from the spirit of, away from the government organization. So the main focus was to keep themselves away and focus on spirituality. They never used to take the gift. They isolated themselves from the state machinery, and they focused more on the welfare of the masses, and they become, they were away from the bureaucratic machinery. So this is what you have to write in the Chishti attitude. Moreover, see, there was, it is said that, Imam Abu Hanifa, turned down the request of Khalifa al-Mansur to accept the post of Qazi. This shows the temperament, that they are not ready to take any kind of, political function. Some saints were also of, extremist attitude in this matter, and they were not willing to associate themselves from the state system. So you have to write their attitude towards the state by giving some examples you can give in context to this, especially the example of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, and how the Sufi saints, Chishti saints, they rejected the Jagirs, which was being offered to them. There was a Sufi saint by the name of Khwaja Qutbuddin Bakhtiar Kaki. He declined to accept the offer of Jagir from Iltutmish. Baba Farid, he was also not ready to take the offers, was a Sufi saint. So we will give some examples. The conflict of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia with, the state machinery of Delhi Sultanate. So ये सब examples आप जो है लिख सकते हैं. You can give such examples. After that, in the second thing that you need to write is you should also write that they rejected the government service. Government service reject कर दिया, जागीर्स reject कर दिया. तो ये सब points आपको इसमें mention करना है. Then attitude Chishti, Sohrawardi attitude. Sohrawardi saints, had different attitude. They consorted with the kings and, put forwarded the arguments that they are connection with the state system. They, visit to the royal courts provided to them with opportunities. Why they do this? Because they will receive the gift and they will give it to the poor people, so that they can redress the grievances of the people. Especially, when they help the poor people by getting their grievances, redressed by Sultan. They also influenced Sultan to keep or maintain the good behavior. They believed, that by establishing, personal contact with the rulers, they could improve the society and they can change their outlook. This was the attitude. They wanted to include the king in their program of spiritual uplift. This is the difference, you see. They were not willing. The Chishtis were not willing to do. बोलते थे वो फकीर का जो है राजा के पास क्या काम है? Chishtis were saying. But they, Sohrawardis, they were in touch with the rulers, because the argument was that they wanted to take the help of the rulers to help the poor people, and moreover to improve their temperament of thinking also, way of thinking also, to make them more moral, well behaved and pro people. So this is what you have to write as far as the Sohrawardi is concerned. Sohrawardi saints, justified the wealth accumulated to help the poor. Chishti condemned it because, such practice of hoarding the wealth was negation of the true spirit, that is trust in God. The tradition of, mixing with the rulers and, taking part in the political affairs was established by the early Sohrawardi saints. समझ रहे हैं? तो ये दोनों में डिफरेंस क्या था ये पूछ रहा है. Sohrawardis, they supported the extension of the political power. For example, you may write, that they were, keen that they were close to Iltutmish. For example, Sufi saint Bahauddin Zakaria Multani was, living in the territory of Kubicha, supported him, and, he supported Iltutmish in extending, his prestige and authority. Bahauddin Zakaria Multani was a Sufi saint. He was living in the territory of Kubja, but even then he supported Iltutmish. So you see the kind of relationship that they had with the ruling class. और चिश्ती को कोई मतलब नहीं था. यही main difference है. And how Bahauddin Zakaria Multani, he joined the Qazi of Multan in planning to overthrow Kubcha's, power in the favor of Iltutmish. So इस तरह से आपको बताना पड़ेगा कि क्या आखिर ऐसी क्या बात थी. So it is a very two-part answer. You write the attitude, you show the difference. Let us take a look of next question. Discuss the transformation of Sikh community from Nirguna Bhakti sect into a political military organization. See, Bhakti movement happened. Bhakti movement, and in Bhakti movement, one of the expression of Bhakti movement was monotheistic movement that was run by Guru Nanak and Kabir. So evolution can be traced, that the evolution of the Sikh community, which was transformed from Nirguna Bhakti sect into politico-military organization. ये पूछ रहा है basically. So the evolution is, traced back to the 18th century. When, Bhakti in the medieval period, not in the 18th century. When in the 15th century, when Guru Nanak was born, Guru Nanak began to advocate the harmony between the two religions, that is Hinduism and Islam. He was a person who preached monotheism. His teachings and legacy were carried forward by the second spiritual guru, whose name was Guru Angad, who invented a definite script of the writing called as Gurumukhi. And further the legacy is being carried forward, and this carried forward by spiritual gurus. For example, the fifth spiritual guru was Guru Arjan, who compiled the text Adi Granth in 1604. However, he was assassinated on the orders of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir in 1605, because he supported the rebellious son of Jahangir, whose name was Khushru. Then in 17th century, Guru Tegh Bahadur became the 9th spiritual guru. And this appointment was not acceptable to the family members of the Guru. And he who requested Aurangzeb to resolve the crisis of this guruship. And he asked Tegh Bahadur to step down from guruship when Aurangzeb asked. But it was refused, and that is why you see he gave the orders for the execution, and which was implemented in 1675. These executions were political in nature. So thereafter, the spiritual guruship was passed to Guru Gobind Singh, who was the 10th Guru. Guru Gobind Singh, he tried to protect the Sikh community against the Mughal onslaughts, the political rivalry that developed. Now it will acquire the politico-military organization. अब politico-military organization की तरफ develop होगा. And Guru Tegh Bahadur, he also began to provide a military training to them, to the Sikhs, to prepare them against any aggression of the Mughals. This resulted into the development of the Sikh community, which was based on the concept of military brotherhood, and it was known as Khalsa Panth. इसको कहते थे खालसा पंथ. तो कैसे एक भक्ति मूवमेंट से इमर्ज किया हुआ एक सेक्ट, जो गुरु नानक जो फर्स्ट गुरु थे, was a spiritual person, and how that same thing got transformed into the politico-military community organization and the establishment of Khalsa Panth. And on account of the military character of Khalsa Panth, Aurangzeb deputed a radical military office, that is Wazir Khan, as the governor of Punjab. So all this was done in reaction to the political authority, or you can say the executions of the Sikhs and the conflict of the gurus with the Mughal emperors. So इस तरह से आपको दिखा के लिखना है कि किस तरह से it got converted into politico-military system. You have to write the role of Banda Bahadur. जबरदस्त एक बहादुर पर्सनालिटी, एक वेरी ब्रेव पर्सनालिटी बंदा बहादुर was. इस तरह से इसमें आप बताइए. So it is not a very difficult, again it is not a very difficult question. बहुत मुश्किल क्वेश्चन नहीं मैं कहूँगा इसको, but it was a question which was based on understanding. So it is based on Bhakti movement plus rise of Sikh community. इससे पूछा. Let us take a look of the next question. Give your assessment of Behlol Lodi's relation with his nobility. This is basically the Lodi comes from the Lodi concept of kingship. Lodi's concept of kingship. Lodi concept of kingship. See, here you have to write what was the relation of Behlol Lodi's relation with his nobility. कैसा relation? That means the concept of it is associated with the concept of the kingship. See, the Afghan theory of kingship, differed from the Turks. Turks की जो theory थी kingship की वो इससे अलग थी. The Turkish theory of kingship was very similar to the theory of Christian and Hindu monarch. Like we see in the case of Turkish sultans like Iltutmish, Sayyid rulers, the different dynasties, the Turks and the Afghans. Sayyids and Lodis were Afghans basically. How it was different. See, they claimed that the Sultan was superior to all, superior to everyone, all his nobles and governors. But in the case of the Afghan theory of kingship, they are equal. Sultan and the nobilities are equal. But the Turks, they say that there is no could claim equality with Sultan. No one is equal to Sultan. But Afghans, on contrary, regarded Sultan as one among themselves. This is the crux of the question. Or only first among equals. They did not, believe in divinity of Sultan like Zill-e-Ilahi, shadow of God on earth. And, claimed power and respect in all matters of the state. So, Afghan theory of kingship believed in equality of nobles with Sultan. And, Sultan and nobles are equal. You will give examples in this case of Behlol. The primary feature of, Afghan theory of kingship was that Afghans did not accept the nomination of the successor of Sultan. They believed, in election of the Sultan by nobility. Imagine, there is no, hereditary succession. Every Afghan noble, claimed by every Afghan noble, they claim to be the Sultan. They can be the part of Sultan. They can become Sultan because Sultan and nobility are equal here. So Behlol Lodi was very close to nobility and he considered himself equal to them because it was based on Afghan theory of kingship. Afghans accepted no exclusive privilege of Sultan. So they maintain this egalitarian system. And that is why the result was that Afghan nobles kept their independent armies, claimed extensive jagirs, enjoyed equal privileges with that of Sultan. This is a very important thing. That is why you see these features in Behlol Lodi was the founder of Lodi dynasty. Behlol Lodi was the first Afghan ruler of Delhi Sultanate. And he founded the Lodi dynasty. And nobles accepted him as their leader. However, you see that Behlol, compromised with Afghan spirit of equality. He was following that Afghan theory of kingship of equality, first among equals. He, sat and ate with the nobles. साथ में बैठ के खाना खा रहे हैं उसके. एक ही दस्तरखान पे, same carpet they used to sit and eat. If any, noble is displeased or, felt displeased, or if he's sick, then, this Behlol Lodi goes to his home and, tries to make him understand and, tries to impress him. He used to share the equal booty with them, with the nobles. Behlol Lodi was a person who was not keeping any kind of bodyguard, personal bodyguards, which is a very, very important feature. तो nobles को अपने बराबर समझता था. And according to Farishta, it is, quoted by him that it is, enough in my name is associated with the kingdom. Professor K.A. Nizami, has also given opinion on the government of Behlol Lodi, which was carrying the spirit of, biradari. So Behlol Lodi respected all Afghan tradition in dealing with the nobility and, kept them satisfied in all aspects. That is why when Behlol Lodi was succeeded by Sikandar Lodi and especially Ibrahim Lodi maintained a difference with the nobility. अपने आप को सुल्तान समझने लगा. बहलोल नहीं समझ रहा था. बहलोल बराबरी में बैठा था. साथ में उठ के बैठ के खाना खा रहा है. कोई नाराज हो गया तो घर पे जाके मनाने के लिए चला गया. इब्राहिम नहीं कर रहा था. इसीलिए इब्राहिम लोदी के खिलाफ सारी नोबिलिटी तैयार हो गई, खड़ी हो गई. इसको हटाओ, क्योंकि वो अफगान थ्योरी ऑफ किंगशिप पे बिलीव ही नहीं कर रहा है. Professor, Iqtidar Hussain Siddiqui, he has opined that, here there is a little bit, debate that one must write in the exam. That the student should write that Professor, Iqtidar Hussain Siddiqui has, has given his differences regarding the opinion expressed by the historian K.A. Nizami in regard to the policy of Behlol Lodi towards nobles. And he says that, primarily he differs regarding with the motives of the policy pursued by Behlol. He agrees, that Behlol behaved with nobles generously, or rather, on an equal footing. But he agrees that it was not because that he believed in the policy, but because he compromised with the circumstances. This is what Professor Iqtidar Hussain says. Iqtidar Hussain further says that, Behlol, believed in despotic monarchy. But he was not behaving accordingly because, he needed the support of Afghan nobles. मतलब मजबूरी थी बहलोल की to consolidate his empire. This is what Professor, Iqtidar Hussain says. Iqtidar Hussain Siddiqui says. He was not following. So this kind of, debate one can write in the exam. Because it was confined to Ibrahim Behlol Lodi, don't need to write about Sikandar and Ibrahim Lodi. And because of the change policy of Ibrahim Lodi, we see the, the differences that rose between the Lodi Sultans and especially Ibrahim Lodi and the nobles, and they invited Babur to invade India. This is what is very important that one should understand कि आखिर ऐसा क्या हुआ था, बाबर क्यों आ गया था. बिकॉज लड़ाई चल रही थी आपस में, बहुत भीषण लड़ाई हो रही थी इब्राहिम लोदी के टाइम में. बिकॉज बहलोल की तरह वो बिहेव नहीं कर रहा था, नॉबल्स को इक्वल फुटिंग्स पे नहीं ले रहा था, उसके जो ताल्लुकात थे वो खराब हो गए थे. Let us take the next question. Examine the basic features of Mughal tomb architecture with special reference to Taj Mahal. It is a question from Mughal architecture. Mughal architecture and especially tomb architecture and special reference to Taj Mahal. So you have to write two parts. First you discuss the features of the tomb architecture and then you write about Taj Mahal. See, the tomb architecture, though it began in Delhi Sultanate period and it was followed in the case of Sher Shah also, and in Mughal the first Humayun tomb, which was square and a garden tomb, and it was constructed by Hamida Bano Begum. And the same thing that was being succeeded in the future years. Hamida Bano Begum was the mother of Akbar, and it was the Humayun tombs was double dome, full dome. So you need to write here the features of the dome architecture also. It has high plinth, and on high stone platforms it was raised. So you give examples about the tomb architecture, Humayun's tomb, and it was built on red sandstone. There was use of blue tiles on the dome, and later on we see that in fact during the time of Babur, the Charbagh style was also associated with the tomb. Charbagh, which is there in Shalimar Bagh and in Lahore and in Delhi, Nishad Bagh in Kashmir. Then this was further it was continued in Akbar's tomb also in Sikandra, where it was a garden tomb. No dome was there. Marble minarets were there. It was first developed in Sultanate period. It was squarish. Then there was the tomb architecture which you can mention about the mausoleum of Jahangir in Shahadra in Lahore. It was a garden tomb. Jahangir's tomb was octagonal minaret square. Then there was a famous tomb that was 𝐬𝐷𝐻𝐿's tomb, the father of Noor Jahan, and it was a garden tomb. It was the first building in complete marble. It has octagonal minarets, square plan, and the use of Petra Doira, which was built by Noor Jahan. And the same thing was being copied. Humayun's tomb and 𝐬𝐷𝐻𝐿's tomb becomes an inspiration for Taj Mahal. The inspiration comes from Humayun's tomb, 𝐬𝐷𝐻𝐿's tomb, and Abdur Rahim Khana. And it has, in the next part, writing the few things about the tomb architecture, and then writing about specifically in context to, we'll write about the Taj Mahal and how the the tomb of Taj Mahal was developed. You can also mention about Petra Doira also in little bit, which was design. Dome maker kaun the? Ismail Khan Rumi, it was a double dome, it was full dome, it was a bulbous dome. Then the black marble inlay was used to write the Quranic verses. So इस तरह से आप इसमें कुछ फीचर्स, मतलब दो पार्ट रहेगा, फीचर्स ऑफ द मुगल टॉम विच वी डिड इन ग्रेट डिटेल इन द नोट्स in the class, and then special features of Taj Mahal, write the inspiration and other things. So it is not a very difficult, again very easy question. Let us take a look of the next question, that is, discuss the importance of ICTA system. How did it help in the centralization of administration of Delhi Sultanate? पूछता है कि ICTA system का क्या importance था, और दूसरा चीज जो वो पूछता है वो है how it helped in the centralization of administration. See, ICTA system is a very important development, and ICTA system is basically developed in the Delhi Sultanate period, and it it played as the military and administrative system. पूरा मिलिट्री और एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सिस्टम जो है डेवलप किया गया था इक्ता सिस्टम के टाइम में. तो इक्ता सिस्टम में सबसे पहले कि क्या है ये इक्ता सिस्टम, और इक्ता सिस्टम का सिग्निफिकेंस क्या है, मतलब व्हाट आर द इम्पोर्टेंट फंक्शंस ऑफ इक्ता सिस्टम. इक्ता सिस्टम का क्या फंक्शन है? सी, इक्ता इज बेसिकली व्हाट? इक्ता इज एन अरबिक वर्ड. It literally means the plot of land, and it developed firstly in the, not in India, in outside, and the system developed in the Abbasid Caliph, under Abbasid Caliph. Abbasid Caliphate was there, Umayyad Abbasid, that we study in the history of Islam, and this system was developed there, and it was inherited in the case of India. In India, the Turkish rulers, they introduced the ICTA system as revenue assignments. And when Turkish rule established in India, it was working as a military system, administrative system, because ICTA was given to the officers, and they were made as iqtadars. So iqtadari system developed outside India, but it was inherited, it was developed in India as well. So basically इसमें आपको जो है इक्ता के बारे में लिखना है कि इक्ता है क्या. तो इक्ता में आप सीधा लिखेंगे कि इक्ता refers to a piece of land, and which was granted by Sultan to his military commanders and the nobles. And the term ICTA is Arabic in nature, origin, and it was brought by Turks in India. First though you will write these things, and ICTA, then you will write that ICTA was the part of the bureaucratic machinery of Delhi Sultanate. And ICTA holder was called as Iqtadar. ICTA is, the Dar is called as holder of the ICTA. So this ICTA system, developed, and it was functioning, and it developed with the passage of time, and it acquired different nature in different period of time. अलग अलग period में ये एक अलग अलग nature को इख्तियार करता गया. It acquired different nature in different period of time. See, ICTA system, played an important role in the, establishment of the strong roots of the Turkish rule in India. And it provided the efficient administrative system and military system to the Turkish rule. ICTA system, enabled the Iqtadar to maintain a large army, and without any serious difficulties. And this military strength of the Turks played an important role in the expansion, imperial expansion and consolidation of the Turkish rule in India. So ICTA system played a role in strengthening the Delhi Sultanate. This is what you have to write. What is the significance? first explaining what is 𝐸𝐾TA system, and the duty of the collectors of the land revenue was defined in their areas. So they get a 𝐸𝐾TA. 𝐸𝐾TA is a piece of land. Holder of that 𝐸𝐾TA is called as 𝐸𝐾TAdar. So 𝐸𝐾TA system, provided the service to the most efficient and capable person in Delhi Sultanate. And they run the administration, and they also, provide military help. It is different from feudal lords. Because see, 𝐸𝐾TA system was not hereditary. It is transferable. 𝐸𝐾TA system, played an important role in keeping Sultan free from the influence of strong nobles. Because, these nobles could keep, see, the major challenge to the Delhi Sultans were the nobles. If the Sultan is strong, nobles are weak. If the nobles are strong, Sultan is weak, because they keep on challenging. So because these nobles, could be kept away from the capital by, appointing, the 𝐸𝐾TAdars. So 𝐸𝐾TA system also, enabled the proper, consolidation of the military system along with the administrative system. Proper consolidation. Military campaigns were being, carried out in the expansion of the Turkish Empire in India. So 𝐸𝐾TA played a very important role. It cannot be denied. 𝐸𝐾TA का एक बहुत मेजर रोल है जो आपको लिखना होगा इसमें, कि मेजर पिलर है ये स्टेट सिस्टम में दिल्ली सल्तनत के. It provided an instrument of centralization. It is an instrument of, the nobility, organization of nobility and military chiefs. And they were, associated with state. Their responsibility were defined. A mode of payment used to work in that case. A system of revenue collection was working. It provided a revenue base because fawazil, which was, extra money, which was given to the state. जो collection होने के बाद जो बचता था, fawazil was the right of state, the extra income. System of maintaining the army. तो इसका significance लिखिए, 𝐸𝐾TA system है क्या वो बता दीजिए. Then you can also write one point that during the time of Firoz Shah Tughlaq, it has become hereditary and it becomes a reason for the fall of Delhi Sultanate also. So it is not a very difficult, question. इसको आराम से हम लोग basically policies of Sultan दिल्ली सल्तनत में हम लोगों ने किया था. टॉपिक दिल्ली सल्तनत में the politico-administrative system in Delhi Sultanate, there we did about this. तो बहुत मुश्किल सवाल नहीं है ये. So let us take a look of the next question. Why the reign of Khalji is known as Khalji Revolution? So here it is a very simple question. Why it is Khalji Revolution? Why the Khalji Revolution? The word revolution is added to Khalji. तो ये बहुत ही ज़्यादा मुश्किल नहीं है. It is a very easy thing. See, it is, the term denotes the replacement of Ilbari dynasty by Khalji dynasty. And here it is not only the change of the government, but in fact it was something more than the change of the government. Because, see, Khaljis came to power not to, support the Khaljis, they came to power not on the support of, either nobility or ulama or the common people, but by the dint of their military strength, of their military might. At the same time, the second thing that you need to write here, that it was the rejection of the racial superiority, racial policy of the Ilbari Turks. So Khalji depends on, opened, the gate of the nobility class to the non-Turks. That is why it is called as revolution. A sea change that has happened. Non-Turks and it has opened the gate for Indian Muslims also. So Alauddin Khalji, made a declaration, who was the most powerful ruler of Khalji dynasty. He made a declaration that kingship knows no kinship. So the social base of the state, broadened. The next thing that you will be writing here in Khalji Revolution, that Khalji Revolution implied a revolt of the lower elements against the established nobility, against the Turkish nobility. So Khalji imperialism, you need to write these things. The end of the Ilbari Turks, the new approach to the rule of the benevolent rulers, new orientation to the state policies. Khalji revolution represented the end of the Turkish political hegemony, and the concept of rule of noble was noble, the high class born lost relevance, and the monopoly of these Turkish nobles ended. That is why they say it is Khalji Revolution. And this Khalji Revolution is a very important aspect to the Khalji rule. It gave impetus to militarism and militarism, and it developed the Khalji dynasty. So Khalji replaced the Turks with non-Turks. This is a very important thing that we need to write here in Khalji Revolution. So the revolution refers to a large scale, changes. You have to write here. The rule of, Khalji represented a new sphere in the administration, a new aspect of politico-administrative system. Khalji had, no faith in the characteristics of the kingship. And I told you what Alauddin Khalji believed. Kingship knows no kinship. So you have to write why it was called as a revolution. What are the important points that Khalji Revolution is called? The policies of, the racial superiority, or the policy of racism that was followed by Balban, pursued by Balban, was abandoned by the Khalji rulers, giving place to the non-Turks, giving place to lower class, giving place to Indian Muslims. This is what you need to write in Khalji, revolution. So it is a very simple question. Ye aaram se ho jayega, which was the question from Delhi Sultan. Let us take a question. Next question. The late 17th century Mughal India considered to be the period of Jagirdari crisis. See, Jagirdari crisis, becomes a factor for the decline of the Mughal rule. In fact, Mansabdari and Jagirdari crisis, it becomes a factor for the decline of the Mughal rule. And in the course of time, the interest of the state, that zamindars and that of the peasantry started to collide with each other, and it was in the form of the Agrarian Crisis or Jagirdari crisis. So Jagirdari crisis was a very important phenomena that happened in the 17th century, and we find that this crisis was taking in a different shape and different aspects. There was mismatch between the Jagirs and the number of Jagirdars. It was a failure of the Mughal state system, Mughal state administration. Once Mughal state, it got involved in the Deccan problem, and this crisis surfaced, and it becomes a reason for the fall of the Mughal Empire. So Jagirdari crisis is a major phenomena that was developing in 17th century and becomes a major reason for the fall of the Mughal Empire. Especially you need to write here the period of Aurangzeb, because during the period of Aurangzeb, in order to during this period, Aurangzeb, in order to maintain its expenditure, the state was inclined as to appropriate more and more Sare Hasil Jagir in Khalisa land, the crown land basically. And very few Sare Hasil Jagir was left for distribution among the Jagirs. So there was fight for good Jagirs from the Jagirdars. So the good Jagirs were less and Jagirdars were increasing. This resulted into Jagirdari crisis, and which became a reason for the fall of the Mughal Empire. So the Jagirdari crisis represented a typical socio-economic administration crisis during the Mughal period in 17th century, and it has various aspects. It was rested on the complex kind of relation between the state and various groups. It was related to the policy matters. It was related to it was associated with the this functionality of the state system. As far as the Jagirdari crisis is concerned, it was related to the problem of Bejagiri. So all these points that you need to mention, and at the end you will be writing how this typical Jagirdari crisis became a factor for the fall of the Mughal Empire, and mentioning the problem of Bejagiri. This problem was very specific, the problem of Bejagiri, and it becomes the major problem as far as the Mansabdari crisis is also concerned, and decrease in the availability of Jagirs, good Jagirs, and the increasing number of Jagirdars. And this had an adverse impact on the loyalty of the nobility towards the Mughal Empire. So the problem of Bejagiri also you need to write here, and its impact. The impact was that it resulted into the fall of the Mughal Empire, which is a very important reason. तो ये आप लिख लेंगे आराम से. It is a very easy question which is connected to the decline of Mughal Empire. In detail you can write down. I have told you the points that you can mention in the exam. Jagirdari crisis को mention कीजिए, and becomes the very important reason for the failure of the Mughals. Let us take a look of the next question. The Chola rulers were not only the mighty conquerors, efficient administrators, but also the builders of fine temples. Basically, it is related to the Chola architecture. See, here what you need to write, you have to write little bit about the Chola rulers, because the period of the imperial Chola was basically the period of the rise of Dravidian culture. And Chola, beside being the administrator, they were the builders of temples, and that shows their political prestige. तो क्या टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर में उनका रोल है, कैसे उन्होंने क्या किया? द रूलर्स ऑफ द चोला पीरियड, दे बिल्ट ह्यूज टेम्पल्स, and they used to commemorate those temples with the victory that they had. That is an expression of their political prestige. And the kind of temple that they built, you can give some references also in this case. So Chola art. So the Chola rulers, you have to focus on Chola temple architecture. So the Chola rulers were great conquerors and efficient administrators. At the same time, they loved art and architecture. You need to write these points. They built temples, canals, roads, but at the same time, the most important contribution was Chola temple, which was an expression of the high level of the Dravida, which was the high level of the Dravid form of architecture, temple architecture. Early Chola temples were, simple structure, but the later temples became bigger and grand. The gateway of the temple became, which was called as Gopuram. The main shrine was known as Garbha Griha. Here, the images of the gods and goddesses were kept. So you have to write the features of the Chola temple architecture. These images, were made either of stone or bronze. You have to write about mandapa, or the audience hall where the people used to gather. So the chief features of the Chola temples are that it has a massive viman or towers. Massive. It was very it has spacious courtyards. The best example of the Chola temple is Brihadeshwar temple or Shiva temple, which is at Thanjavur, and it was built by a Chola king, Raja I. And this Brihadeshwar temple is, a wonderful piece of architecture. So you need to describe little bit about the Chola temples. Another important temple was the Gangai-Konda Chola temple, and this was built to commemorate the victory over the north, basically, when this temple was developed. So Chola temple का specific feature क्या है? And you need to mention how these Chola rulers, beside being the great conquerors and administrators, they were the great, temple builders. The important characteristics of the Chola architecture was mandapa, vimana, and gopuram. Gopuram is gateway. So Ferguson, who writes that Chola architecture, is basically an expression of their political prestige, which was seen in the huge and humongous temple that they built. Then, Percy Brown also writes on the Vimana of Brihadeshwar temple, which was, the climax of the Indian architecture, the Dravid form of temple architecture. Gangai-Konda Cholapuram, temple of Gangai-Konda Cholapuram, which was constructed by Rajendra I. These examples you need to write in the case of Chola architecture. तो थोड़ा सा बताइए कि how they were conquerors and efficient administrators. Give a little introduction about Chola, how Cholas were mighty conquerors and efficient. Then the thrust of the answer should be on how they were the builders of the fine temples. So this is basically a question from Chola temple architecture. Discuss with relevant illustrations the relation between Akbar and Rajput policy, Rajput state. Basically, this is a question of Rajput policy of Akbar. अकबर की राजपूत पॉलिसी से रिलेटेड है, और ये बहुत सिंपल क्वेश्चन बिकॉज इट was taught in the Mughal policies, Akbar's policy, Rajput policy. See, here what you need to write. See, Akbar's treatment of Rajput, as we know, was not the outcome of his, thoughtless sentiment, but in fact, it was the result of the deliberate policy. It was the result of the deliberate policy. How to incorporate Rajput in the politico-administrative machinery. And Akbar did this by bringing them under the, within the administrative structure of the Mughals, and, developed a friendly attitude towards Rajput. giving them, the place in the high levels of administration, giving them high mansab. So here basically you need to write certain things, that क्या nature है Rajput policy का, that it was, essentially political in nature. It was a part of the broader imperialistic approach of Akbar. These points you need to write here. It was the part of broader policy of, to dominate the various autonomous kings and zamindars. It was one of the, aspects of the policy established by, the personal and, political relations with the powerful Rajas and zamindars, to take the help of Rajputs in administration, in military, and in an era of personal loyalties, personal relation was a good guarantee of political loyalty as well. That is why Akbar and Rajput, they entered into the matrimonial relations. Rajput policy initiated by Akbar was enduring in nature, and Mughal Rajput alliances was formed, and it continued with building the steel framework of the political administrative system of the Mughals. Why he maintained, why this factor, why this policy was done, what are the important reasons? See, I told you it was motivated by the politico-strategic and economic factors. It was to control, it was to constitute and control the Mughal nobility and bureaucracy. It was beneficial for Akbar. Difficulties of Akbar in the early years and the concern for the power in few hands. So there was need to maintain that balance. So that is why it was carried out. Moreover, the geostrategic position of Rajasthan was also a reason. Rajasthan, represented a link between the Gangetic Valley and the western ports. Rajasthan represented a link between Gangetic Valley and Malwa. Malwa was, a very prosperous tract in central India. And, Malwa was the need of, the Mughals to control it. Malwa was a prosperous tract in central India, I told you. And, which opened the way between Gujarat and peninsular India, that is the southern part. So for this, Rajput's help was needed. Malwa had, trade relations with other parts of the world. The control of Malwa can help in marine trade. Malwa constituted an important, hinterland of Gujarat port. So that is why it was, carried out. And how this found an expression, the Akbar, granted mansabs, high military rank to the Rajputs, granting high offices to Rajputs. Rajputs were made partners in the state system. Rajputs were made, close confidants. They were given the offices of trust and responsibilities. Rajputs were known for their courage and their, loyalty. दो चीजों के लिए फेमस है, courage and loyalty, वफादारी. And Akbar was well aware of this. That is why Akbar pursued the policy of giving them the subedaris. Man Singh was incorporated and in the system of administration. So that is why it has a political implications. It has a political implications. It was, a unique example of communal alliance and cooperation. It led to the establishment of the political cooperation between the ruling groups of the two communities. Because Akbar knew that Akbar believed in composite culture. Akbar believed in unity in diversity. Akbar was seeing India with different eyes. He was not biased. He was not bigot. He was not conservative. So it was significant for Mughals. It was significant for Rajputs as well. Because Rajputs got associated with the paramount power of India. Mughals were paramount that time. And association with the Mughals provided a dignity and prestige to the Rajputs. Association, provided a kind of protection to the Rajputs. So it has several implications that you need to write here in the relation of Akbar with the Rajput state. So ये बहुत मुश्किल नहीं है. It was taught in Rajput policy of Akbar. Let us take a look at the next question. How far it is justified to consider the states like Bengal, Awadh and Hyderabad as successor state of the Mughal state? See, this we studied in medieval India, we study in modern also, we study that how there was, the rise of autonomous states. And there are the different aspects of the autonomous states or regional powers that developed in the 18th century. And there were, the three forms of, states, new states. One was successor state, other was warrior state, and the next was independent state. The very good example of successor state was the Bengal, Awadh and Hyderabad. And the question is indicating towards the successor state. Successor state क्या होता है? See, the successor state were founded by the Mughal Subedars or the governors, who became autonomous during the decline of the Mughal Empire. These states were, the Mughal provinces, which were earlier the Mughal provinces and was transformed into autonomous states over a period of time. At the same time, the governor were never formally, declared the disassociation with the Mughal Empire. And they acted as a semi-autonomous states in their own conduct. ये आपको बताना होगा. And give examples of, Bengal, give example of Awadh, give example of Hyderabad, give example of Bengal in case of, how Murshid Quli Khan, how he was, the Emperor Aurangzeb had, earlier appointed him as Diwan or collector of Bengal. And how later he was the founder of the Bengal, state of Bengal. कैसे उसने फिर establish किया? अवध के केस में अवध was one of the three successor state which was, gradually moving towards the independence from Mughal Empire. It gradually became semi-autonomous to autonomous state under Saadat Khan. Burhanul Mulk was the founder. तो इस तरह से डेवलप कैसे करता गया? बंगाल है, अवध है, हैदराबाद का केस बड़ा क्लासिक है. हैदराबाद केस इज वेरी क्लासिक एज अ सक्सेसर स्टेट, कि किस तरह से हैदराबाद स्टेट जो है डेवलप कर गया. हैदराबाद वाज फाउंडेड एज एन इंडिपेंडेंट स्टेट बाय निजामुल मुल्क असफ जाह और चिंगकिज खान. And he was, appointed as Subedar of Hyderabad by the Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah. He also acted as Wazir under Muhammad Shah during, period of 1722 to 24. So we find that there are succession which got converted into semi-autonomous and finally autonomous states. That is why initially you will write that there are three types of state: successor state, new states, and independent state. Then you come to successor state and give examples. Define successor state and give examples. So it is very easy question. बहुत मुश्किल नहीं है, मैं बता रहा हूँ. Question of this year is not a difficult, not at all difficult. Only few questions that also in paper 2 we find that it is a bit tricky. But in general it was an easy question. बहुत आसान question पूछा है. तो इसको I am sure that the student who has studied properly will surely touch 300 score. So ये भी it was an easy question. So here we basically complete the paper 1, section A and section B. So in this session we complete the question analysis and discussion of paper 1 of history optional, and I have discovered that this year the question was quite easy, except few questions which were a bit tricky, and that I have explained it. So I am sure that I hope that this session would be beneficial for you, and I wish all the students who appeared this year in the main exam with history optional or without history optional, and I wish them that they appear in the interview, they get an interview call, and finally they come out with flying colors. And it will be helpful for those aspirants also who are preparing for the mains exam in the next year for history optional. So here I end this session of paper 1 discussion. In the next session I'll be discussing paper 2 of history optional. So thank you so much for a patient hearing.